Good evening, folks. Good evening, folks. An exciting show in which I text with my partner downstairs about the baby crying in the background. All right. So today is Friday Night Fights. I'm going to have some battles to watch in a moment. Before we do, let me pull up a position we can look at for fun while we wait. Doesn't seem like a puzzle for me. Let's try something else. King and pawn ones. Okay, let's open up another window here. Okay, does that show up well here? Yeah, looks fine. Okay, I think it's black to play. Yeah. Okay, so this is black to play. Warm up. Problem. Black to play. All right, just a little warm up for those who want to play or those who want to watch. Either way, we can do a little warm up. The tournaments will start in half an hour. I'm going to set this up on my actual chessboard here. So it's an interesting endgame in that black has this extra outside passer, but black's king is really badly placed. So at first glance, this position should appear to you all as what we call a 3-result position, meaning it could be a draw, or it could be winning for white, or it could be winning for black. So here's how it could be winning for black. While the white king goes over here, the black king could somehow get into the game and win a different pawn. Then black would be winning. The way it could win for white is white catches this pawn and then doesn't let the black king into the game and marches around here and gets into like d7, e7 and squeezes the black king and wins the game via king position. So each player has a way to potentially win. It's black's move on the first move, so I'll just show you all kinds of moves that are possible here. Not too many, so we should be able to sort of crunch through them kind of like a computer, right? Just looking at basically every possibility should be just about possible. And yeah, that's the puzzle I lay before you while we wait for the tournament today. And yeah, I'm going to look on my real board here. Interesting. Anything you should know? Are you planning to play tonight or watch? There's 2 sections depending on your chess.com rating, under 1600, over 1600. The over 1600 plays a time control of 90 minutes plus 30 seconds. Under 1600 plays 45 minutes plus 30 seconds. You can find a game on your own just by challenging somebody you know in the dojo or somebody you find in the chat. You can also find a game by joining one of the 2 arenas and just getting paired at random. At semi-random, the arenas are going to pair you with somebody as close to you in rating as possible. If you want to play a slightly different time control than our arenas, that would be one reason to arrange your own game with somebody else from the dojo. Because then you can set it up, at any time and any time control that you agree on with somebody else. It's set up as an arena, but not so that you play for 24 hours, just so that somebody else who's asleep right now can play a game when they get up tomorrow. It's just to make it available to people for 24 hours. Nobody's really supposed to play more than one game. But often chess.com will abort a game in the opening if somebody spends more than 30 seconds playing e4 or something like that. It assumes that they're griefing their opponent or something, and it'll forfeit them. So in those cases, it's nice for people to be able to just repair and get a second game if they get a game that gets aborted or canceled for some reason. So it's somewhat convenient to have the arena format, but the expectation is that you play one game. One game where you really concentrate on that game and use a good chunk of your time. Okay, I'm going to step away for a few minutes and see if I can't get the baby to go to sleep. You guys have this position to figure out, black to play. So you can work on it alone or together, honestly. You can share ideas in the chat, or you can just sit and stare at the board like I would do for 20 minutes in silence and then finally say, aha! All right, I'll be back. Take care, everyone. I don't know, but she quieted down as I approached the door, so maybe there's some hope here. For anyone on YouTube who wants to find the tournament, going through the Chess Dojo Club is a convenient way to find the tournament under upcoming events like this. Maybe I should go to Twitter and announce it as well, since there's currently 0 people in the tournaments. Tickets for Chennai Grandmaster is now available. Super GM tournament, super cool. this? So I say Friday night fights starting soon. Chess TV. Almost posted the old ChessDojoLive URL again. Raise the curve is in. Okay. Got my puzzle here. Howdy, Daniel. Hope you're doing well today. I'm still close to 2,500, Dabo. This is on my rapid rating, I think. My blitz rating is very close to 2,500 right now. Indeed. I'm going to try to make 2,500 one day. Oh my God, I might be 2,492 right now even. It's like as high as ever. Anyway. All right, so we've got this tournament here that folks can join. Then we've got a puzzle to solve while we wait. Good evening. Good evening. Colibri Kartoffel. Funny name. Currently 4:40 a.m. in Germany, according to my calculations. Black to move, yeah. Oh, your last game was a match against the Scrubs, huh? Yeah, that has been a while. So just to be clear about this, folks, this position is just a position I saw that I thought might be interesting. It's not a puzzle from a book. Okay? We don't know if there's a good move for black or not, right? It could just be losing for black no matter what you do. It might be winning no matter what you do. It might be a draw no matter what you do. Or it might matter what you do. Okay? It's just a position I saw in a live game and thought to myself like, oh, that looks like an interesting position. Which I think makes it a very good puzzle. But for anyone who's out there used to just saying like, oh, this is how you solve puzzles. You just play the violent looking move and then it always works. It's not that kind of a puzzle. Fortunately for me, I can solve any king and pawn position, gefilte fish. That's correct. And I will now solve this one. Yeah, Daniel, you can make suggestions if you want. You guys are welcome to discuss in chat. Kartoffel, it's black's move. So black cannot play king d4 right now. But king d4 is a good instinct for white. I think it's a safe guess that if you played something like, you know, king h7 or something, white would play king d4 next. That's a reasonable move to expect. Oh, you're fine. What's up? I'm streaming. Okay. So I'm just looking at a real board over here, folks. If I'm acting weird, I'm just looking at a board, okay? So, and if folks come in and don't know what's going on while I'm staring at my king and pawn ending, you can just tell them it's Friday Night Fights and tell them how to join, right? Like they can type !fight if they're in Twitch. If they're in YouTube, they can go to Chess Dojo's club on chess.com. Like that. Hopefully that works. All right, let me put up the puzzle. Or the puzzle that may or may not be a puzzle. The position. I think I solved it. I think I've got an answer. Let's see what others say. So raise the curve says I like the pawn moves, the king moves. F5, EF6, E5, FG, G5. Okay, raise the curve. If I've understood your variation, it looks like this, 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 takes here, takes here. With the intention of holding these pawns and passing this pawn. But there's still a white pawn on G4. I may have gotten your variation wrong, in which case I apologize for that. But this is what I think you suggested and why I think it doesn't work, because there's still a G pawn on G4 here. Kappa A suggests the same first move as you, pushing the pawn to force white to go after it. Also, good evening, MD Knight. Thank you, Katafa. I'm glad you like my mother's painting of a chess dream. Okay, so then we have a suggestion from Dabo, which Eric thinks is correct, and I also think is correct. So you start with G5, and the choices for white are to take, to push, or to ignore it and go this way. So I think taking might be the simplest, so I'll show that first. King takes. And now basically the intention from black is that whenever white goes to take the C pawn, you'll capture the E pawn with the king, and then you're up a pawn, and it's a pretty simple affair here. No real hope or counterplay for white. If white tries to, keep your king out of F4, you can always push the pawn to drag white away, and you get the same situation. So I think G5 takes, king takes is winning for black. Next branch, G5, king here. Nothing better to do than take. Takes. Now this pawn is in the way, because normally now you'd want to go king G5, king F4, and you'd win the endgame, right? But yeah, here if you go king G5, king B4, and your king can't go, right? So as Dabo says, just start pushing the pawn. This also, by pushing the pawn, you don't have to calculate this king c5, king d6, king e7 idea like you have to if you play king g5. Because here you're threatening to queen super fast. Obviously, they can't start walking towards f7 with the king. They have to come back towards your pawn, right? So you draw them away, then you come here, they take the pawn, and you come in here. And you'll collect the pawn on e5 because you got your king super active and behind that pawn. So I think that proves that king d4 loses to g takes f4. Okay. That leaves f5, the tricky move. Now after f5, at first it looks like your king's boxed out and like you're still going to lose basically to something like here, 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 here. Your king sucks, they take this pawn and they come up the c file. And you're just totally boxed in. So the only hope after f5, I think, is this slightly surprising move that you trade. This is slightly surprising because it's letting white get the e-pawn through most likely, right? But okay, two branches, pawn takes and king takes. We'll go king takes first. This pawn runs now. It's out of the box. The king can't get back to it, right? So the only thing you need to calculate before you do this is you calculate c3, king f6, c2, king takes f7, c1 equals queen, e6. And you just ask yourself if you got a queen first. The answer is you did. So that worked. So the other option for white is g takes, and now this pawn looks very strong. But my calculation said that after g4, black was going to queen one of these pawns, and actually that black's king can still stop this pawn. It's not even really a race. There's a bit of a race, a little calculation, but yeah, here it seemed like white was losing. For example, e6, you take, come here. White can't stop the king from going to e6. Good night, Kartoffel. Sleep well. Schlaf gut. Träum süß. Bis morgen. This is a 24-hour tournament, so if you want to play with some dojoers, you can always come back tomorrow and try and play somebody. Okay, or we'll see you another time. Yeah, if white goes for the c pawn, black will take in queen. If white takes the g pawn, black will push this pawn, and the king just can't catch them both. Whereas this king actually can catch both of these. And that's pretty much everything there is to say about it. White can also take. We immediately go for h3. Ich kann das aber lesen. Ohne Problem, Kolibri. Morgen früh haben wir auch ein Rapid-Turnier. Also, das könnte mal auch was sein. That's right, Daniel Shields. c3 on the first move is wrong. It's very important to play g5 yourself on the first move. Mein Vater ist Deutsch. Hat mir Deutsch beigebracht, als ich ein kleines Kind war. Daher kommt die Name Pruess. Dabo, you're wondering if in the gf5 line, if you can just play king g7 here and still split the white king with your pawns? Seems like probably, yeah. That should still be winning for black, actually. Yeah, raise the curve. It comes from Prussia, you know. The king takes f5 line. Oh, by the way, folks, 3 minutes to join the tournaments. I don't know if the warm-up puzzle is drawing too much attention away from that fact, but the tournaments are starting in 3 minutes. So it's time to get in there and register if you want to play today. Yeah. We still need a couple players for the tournaments not to get canceled by chess.com. That said, I've been sick for ages. So if you guys don't want to play tonight and we just go to bed, that'll work for me, honestly. Ja, ich bin hier in Amerika aufgewachsen, in Kalifornien. Und da lebe ich jetzt auch noch. So this one here, you want to go king g7. With the idea of then you can always run this. So white could play this move and catch your c pawn though, right? So now you've made it more complicated. Much more complicated, no? Yeah, I also hope it doesn't get canceled. I want people to be able to play, of course, raise the curve. Ja, gute Nacht. Bis morgen. So what do you want to do next here, Dabo? F6 or something to try and bust out? Interesting to say. Yeah, it's an interesting position to figure out. Oh. So like something like this, you can see it's a draw. The white king got back in range. No problems. Draw. Actually, is it even a draw or does white win? They threaten to go king e4, king f5. And if black ever goes f6, they take and come here and then force their way over. Oh my goodness, black loses. It was interesting to ask this, Dabo. Black loses. Right? That's a fascinating result. Let me double check that because the term's about to start and we don't have a lot of time. Ah, okay, black can still save it. They just have to wait, and whenever the white king's on e4, then go king e6. And white just has to wait around, right? And they can wait around like this, but black has enough squares to wait on it if you ever come to e4, king e6, draw. Okay, simple. Simple. I'm just like rushing a little bit. The other thing you can do is right away here after king e4, you can play f6. And in this position, one option for white to draw is you go here, here, here. And actually, I say draw, but black has to be careful, right? Because if they go here, white's going to win this pawn. So I think you have to sack the pawn and take the opposition to hold. Oh, you're saying you could maybe go f5 if white doesn't take you? Like this? Yeah, that might work at that point, yeah. Okay, I got to get people set for the tournament. So, let's refresh this tournament here. We now have 4 people in under 1600, so that, oh sorry, in 1600 plus, so that's holding. And let's check the under 1600. Did they get a 4th player? Oh yeah, they got plenty. All right, so the tournaments are happening. For those of you playing in the tournaments are starting in 1 minute and 20 seconds. So, just a quick comment to those of you who are going to play. Number 1, first of all, we salute you for playing at the end of perhaps a long week. Good on you. You're about to play a serious game. Secondly, the suggestions are to monotask completely. You know, turn off your phones or throw them away. You know, just focus on what you're doing. Close your other tabs. If you've got a real chessboard you can play on, you can use that. Mute the stream so you don't hear me talking during your game. Just really turn everything off and focus on one thing. It's one of the best things that chess gives us nowadays is an opportunity to focus and practice our focus and, you know, have a good ability to do that. Okay. Yeah, congratulations, MD Knight. Good job there. And yeah, 10 seconds to go. So yeah, good luck, everybody. Enjoy your games. Don't worry too much about winning or losing. Just enjoy playing. All right, and I'm going to finish setting up my board so I can follow one of these games on my board. It's going to make your game even more attractive to watch for me. So I'm setting that up over here. All right, the game should have started. Hopefully nobody gets forfeited or disconnected in the first couple moves here. Let's open up a first game here and a second game here. And here we've got an exchange French. Looks good. Let's try an exchange French. D4, D5, E5, E5, Bishop D3, Bishop D6, Knight F3, and black breaks the symmetry early on with Knight E7, and white plays Knight BD2. This is a not trivial choice because it kind of blocks in this bishop, so we have to ask ourselves, what kind of a maneuver does white have in mind with this Knight F1 move, right? Not an obvious move. So we have to wonder about that. So that's the start here. Hokey Gamer versus Jill Johnson Chess. Both players we've seen in many battles before. Some real regular dojoers. We get castling from black and another non-trivial move from white, H3. So black should be really suspicious at this point. What is white up to? Because white is not playing the most obvious moves like castles. An obvious move like castles might also have a devious idea, but when you see your opponent doing moves like this, you got to know they're up to something devious. You got to have some kind of an alarm going off, like they have a non-standard idea. It might be good or bad, but you need to appreciate what the idea is and figure out, like, what are they up to? So is white trying to just keep this bishop from coming out, or is white planning not to castle? Are they planning G4? Are they planning Knight F1, Knight E3, or Knight G3? That's what black really needs to be asking themselves. I mean, probably castling was the correct response for black, but it's still helpful to figure out what your opponent's up to if you can. Now, I'm going to open up the 1600 plus arena and also open up one or two of their games. So here we've got Dan Shields versus Femme Tantra. And they already have like a crazy fight going on. Goodness. Black's trying to maybe win a piece. I mean, black's using some tactics around winning a piece with a pawn fork here. What was the move order? D4, check here. Wow. Just leaving this pawn open. That's a weird line I've never seen before. Already on move 3, I'm out of my opening experience in books. Kicks it, comes here. White could take the pawn on e5 in two ways, and presumably black would take on e4. So white defends it, leaving tremendous pressure on e5. Black can't defend it because it's attacked twice already. So white's hoping to basically get ed4, cd4 situation, but black fights back immediately. And white takes here, and now black has to decide if they're taking on e4 by pawn or by knight. Both are entirely possible. Bonsoir, Elise. Hope you're doing well today. I suspect you are. Let me open up the other game here. Hey, Aiden. Good eye to you. Hope you've been well. This is one of our few Aussie-friendly timed shows of the week. Long week, but you got paid. And did that make up for did that make up for it? Did you get paid to make enough to make up for the week? This looks like a symmetrical English. They're putting out the knights, and white tries to get a little advantage on the D file here. You get the trade, and black goes to put the bishop on a nice diagonal that'll have no pawns blocking it. And Where is the Bread is a habitual user of extreme amounts of time. Always low on time by move 20 or so, I would say. Maybe not always. Generally, typically out of time by move 20. So we'll see. But I'm sure small beak is in for some deep thinks from white pretty soon here. I do know that feeling when you are excited about something, you give a lot, and then actually you give too much and you find yourself really tired. Yeah. Okay, Bread had a game against Elise with good time management. Okay, so it varies. It varies, I guess. Yeah. Okay, and so of the games we're watching, okay. Of the games we're watching, here after h3, black played. Oh, sorry, let me back it up for you. Knight c6, attacking this d pawn. White played c3, holding it. And Jill Johnson is spending some time, so they've noticed that Hokey Gamer was doing something unusual, and they're taking the time to sort of figure out what it might be with knight f1, knight e3, and stuff. Now, there was a comment earlier from Dribman saying that he didn't think that either g4 or knight f1 were particularly threatening in this position, and the reasoning was pretty good. So first of all, he said g4 seems generally less threatening because there's no knight on f6, so you're not gaining a tempo, you're not kicking your opponent's piece to a worse square, you don't really have a hook to trade a pawn at f6 or h6. You're kind of grabbing some space, but you don't have an immediate line of attack, and right, you're not developing as fast as you could, that sort of thing, right? Yeah. So that seems less exciting. And then the second thing Dripman said was, like, if you start maneuvers with knight f1, he feels pretty comfortable just playing rook e8. And is not scared of these kind of slow maneuvers when black's gonna be bothering white on the e file in a second, which is reasonable. Now the knight or bishop could go to e3, so black's not gonna have an immediate disaster on the file. But yeah, like if we go rook e8 here, knight check, knight here, black's well poised to put some pressure here, right? Actually, probably white's gonna even just throw away the bishop pair pretty soon to reduce the pressure. So it doesn't seem very thrilling for white either. So yeah, I think I'm mostly convinced by what Dripman said, that neither g4 nor knight f1 seems like a big deal. Excuse me. If black plays rook e8, I would expect that white's just going to castle and we'll get back into fairly normal waters. But, I mean, that still remains to be seen, right? So Gil is having a little think about it. Another thing white could do is maybe queen c2, poke at h7, see if you get a weakness, and prevent the move bishop f5, which might be desirable. So I guess the big question would be rook e8, queen c2. Can we bother white with this check? My first impression would be, yeah, that looks bothersome for white. Another thing black could do is bishop f5, actually. Stopping bishop h7 check, and if white takes, then you take here with check, and there's no time to capture the knight. Unfortunately, white can't block on the e-file, so the king gets displaced, and black continues development. And you would just expect black to be a little bit better because white has to figure out the king and rook being misplaced. It's going to be annoying for white. So queen c2 looks like really nothing after the nice positional bishop f5. Of course, white can also castle and avoid any disasters. And then after queen d7, it's about equal, but black completed development nicely, trades white's best piece, the light squared bishop. And white doesn't have this guy out yet. So it's already, a minuscule advantage for black. Here it's sort of like small and positional. Not as serious as the line where white played king f1 and it was truly a bit awkward, but yeah, still, black's just super, super good immediately. So rook e8 looks quite sufficient. Did I hang f5? No, I just explained why I didn't hang f5. I played rook e8, here, here, takes, check. And white has no time to capture the knight. And then here I said black was better. So I highly recommend this move, rook e8. Quite a nice move. In response for white, I would just castle. I don't see any reason for white to go seeking adventures here. There's nothing thrilling about white's position to me. I don't see the justification for blocking this in or spending a move on the pawn. Like, the bishop can develop in one move, so what has h3 really done for us? No, I think white has swapped from playing white to playing black. Right, and so... yeah. Bishop f5 was played. Perfect. Solid positional move as well. Honestly, rook e8, castles, bishop f5 is probably how I would play it. So it's very, very similar to bishop f5 immediately. Good chance of transposing. So, yeah, fine. Everything's fine. Checking on our other boards here, white chose to take with the knight, black took with the pawn, bishop c4, now black's in thought. Normal would be to castle to defend this f7 spot. If castling isn't good, technically you have this move bishop e6, but that move doesn't look very good at all. It really leaves black with a bad pawn structure. If black castles, they might be slightly worried by queen b3 adding pressure, but I think queen e8, it looks ugly, but it's just fine. It does what you need it to do, right? It defends f7, and then white hasn't taken any particular advantage, so the players will just untangle from there. I don't think that's especially good or bad for either player. And we've got where's the bread here, knight d4, g6, knight b5 was played. I'm not sure what for. a6 from small beak, and yeah, I don't know where the knight on b5 is headed. But a6, you could think of it as a weakening move or a useful move because the white knights often like to have the b5 square. Certainly white's going to move this knight twice while black moves the pawn once. So black's going to come out ahead of tempo. I don't see the point of knight b5. I can't even imagine a reasonable point of knight b5. Grab the under 1600 link and check what they've done there. Whoa. Very unusual move from black before we go check the other game. Sort of inviting a fried liver style knight f7, right? But these are 2000 and 2100 level players. Why play such a weird move? It must be a trap. There's no way. It looks like it simply works for white in 2 seconds. You know, you just attack these 2 pieces. And then after king takes, you give a check. Double attack. And if the knight comes to defend, you go to e5. Check. Recover the piece. And then just keep laughing. It looks instantaneously winning for white, knight f7. And it's been played, actually, by Femme Tantra in a matter of 40 seconds. So for a classic game with 90 minutes on the clock, I think there's no way you should play knight f7 as quickly and casually as I've calculated it for everybody. I mean, you should assume that your opponent probably sees something, and you should double check for a few minutes, triple check, quadruple check. Even though after 2 seconds, you know, you're basically certain. I can tell you, like, I'm basically certain knight f7 works after 2 seconds. But that has nothing to do with it. As long as I have the time on the clock, I will double check more because I know that it's decisive if it works. I've got the time. I've got nothing else to do with my time. So I will check exhaustively if I have this position as white. I will spend more time than our Femme Tantra did. Yeah, that's just the seriousness and the playing the percentages of a serious player, you know. I don't know, Elise. I haven't seen a 2100 allow knight takes f7 in the first few moves like this in a while. In a little while. I mean, to be fair, black was playing the Petrov defense, is that what it's called? So it's pretty easy to get your knight to f7 against this opening. I would have just rushed it there. But this is going even better for white. Okay, here are Vlad the Awesome and Kappa A. I don't think we'd seen this board just yet. Looks like a pleasant position for black straight out of the opening with good control of the dark squares and room for all the pieces. Check how it happened real quick. White played a very passive... Oh, another... Petrov, very passive d3 against it, which shouldn't be terrible, but takes. Now, don't you need to grab this pawn to punish black for being so aggressive? Yeah, I mean, you gotta take the pawn. That or play queen e2 and then take the pawn next move. Too passive from white. Then they trade, weaken their structure. Black's doing very nicely here. They just have to watch out a little bit for this rook here for some possible tactics on e5 and f4. Gotcha, Shirogorov. Yeah, so that was the advice that came from Kostya that I mentioned, right? To check your opponent's age before OTB games. So just in general, older and younger players are going to have some real differences, especially very young and very old. If your opponent is somewhere between, 20 and 35 or so, then it's not going to tell you too much, other than it's going to tell you that they're not old or young, right? But for a young player, generally, it's going to tell you that they lack experience, that they don't have a vast store of positions and ideas, so their evaluations won't be as good, or won't be like the strong point of their game, right? And usually they'll be a pretty good calculator. They'll usually have pretty good energy. There's certain kinds of mistakes they might still make, right? They might be over anxious, over optimistic, play too fast. Those are kind of like young people things. They might not have. Some really young kids won't have the stamina for a really long game. So if your opponent's like 7, 8, 9 years old, something like that, they might not have the Sitzfleisch. What would be an English word for that idea? They might just not be used to sitting for so long, basically, right? So they might play worse later on, even though in theory, they're young and energetic, but they might run out of some kind of stamina in a longer game. So against a younger player, you could purposely choose openings that lead to longer games or lead to end games or lead to locked positions, right? You could sort of say the opposite for players over 40. And then this gets more and more as they get to be like 50 and 60 years old and 70 years old and 80 years old. But players past a certain age, you're going to expect that their calculation has started to slow down, that they commit a certain number of like errors if the position gets really complicated, or that they run out of time dealing with those calculations in order not to blunder anything. And yeah, depending on your age and what your strengths or weaknesses are, you can try and adjust your approach based on these things, right? You can try and create a very complicated tactical game against an older player. Some of this is like a little bit stereotypical, but it probably tends to hold fairly often. And the openings you choose are going to have some effect on what type of game you get. Furthermore, Shirogorov, other things like this may or may not matter at every level of chess, but I think if I'm not mistaken, you're somewhere around maybe 2100, so it might apply to your level. If I'm looking at a certain opening that I'm preparing against a 10-year-old, they probably don't have 5 other openings that they've got experience playing and that they could switch to, right? But if I'm preparing for somebody who's 40 years old, I can't assume that just because they've played the French defense in 9 out of 10 of their tournament games in the last couple of years, I can't assume that means they'll play the French. I can't be 100% dependent on my prep in the French, because you have to assume that almost any player who's 40 years old or so has been playing chess for a while and has practiced different openings, at least in online blitz or something like that. So that's just another example of like experience in how you make your calculations and what you expect from players, right? Some players, if they smell that you have prepared something, They will just switch openings over the board because they have that general experience to be able to play a few different things. Other people just don't have any other option because they're younger and they just haven't built up any experience. So if they suddenly play the Caro-Kann instead of the French, they might be out of book on move 3 or 4, and they might really, truly not know what they're doing. So, yeah. So it's all just considerations, you know. One of the decisions that you're making, at least at my level when I'm preparing in a tournament, one of the important decisions is how much time I'm spending on which different lines I'm preparing, right? So if I'm looking at you and I'm seeing that you're a French defense player who used to play the Sicilian 10 years ago and now you play the French, I have to decide, how much of my time do I spend on the French? How much of my time do I spend on the Sicilian? And do I double check any other lines before the game, right? And how I allocate that time and which lines I choose to study is actually going to be affected by the age that I found for you online, right? Your birth year, right? So if you've been playing for 3 years or 4 years and you're 10, 11 years old, I might put 100% of my effort into the French and just not even worry about anything else. Even, let's say, Shirogorov, I'm a D4 player, right? But I'm preparing for somebody and I choose, like, I'm going to prepare E4 for this game because they always play the French. As a D4 player, I'm comfortable playing the French because a lot of D4 players would be comfortable in French positions, right? So it's a D4 player kind of going out on the limb. They're making the decision, I'm going to prepare E4 and the French against this kid. I've played the French as black myself. And the kid will have spent their time preparing for my D4 repertoire that I normally play. But that kind of a decision is much riskier against somebody who you think has a 40% chance that they switch to the Sicilian if you're just a D4 player, right? So any of those kind of decisions, any of those preparation calls, they're all affected by that kind of aspect of the player. And I could get into more and more and more detail on all of that, right? Because the more you've played and the longer you've played and the more games you've prepped, the more depth and nuance and detail there is to how players like Kostya or I make those opening decisions. And I can only imagine that the players 300-400 points above us are making their decisions based on even more complicated thought processes, right? Just choosing where they're spending their time and when to play for what surprise and how much to cover other options, etc. You know, what are the chances that you prepare a bunch of stuff and then after E4, E5, your opponent plays D3 and your book is gone? And is that going to be comfortable or uncomfortable for you or your opponent, right? And you have to sort of have a sense of how you match up with them to know who wants to do something like that, who doesn't, who's going to benefit from it, etc. Okay, so this was a very important decision here for Kappa A between bishop e6 and bishop f5 mainly. I think a lot of people would also consider bishop g4, but I don't really want to trade my bishop for either of these white pieces. So I'm not a fan of just pointlessly aggressive bishop g4s if I'm not really looking for trades. Bishop g4s can also walk into tactics sometimes. You have to be very careful of calculating knight e5 when the rook's opposite your queen and you put your bishop on an undefended square. You'd have to be, you definitely have to be paying attention and being careful about checking all those moves if you do it. It could potentially work because you have this knight e2 check in reserve to always sort of take over this diagonal thing, but yeah. My first preference would be to go here and target their weakest spot, right? And play rook d8 as quickly as possible and really go after this. But yeah, I wasn't sure about even this move actually. Knight d5, hitting my queen. Knight takes, pawn takes, hitting my knight. The knight's got to move somewhere. And it doesn't actually have a great move, right, for where it wants to go. might be so bad that it has to go to b8. But let's try the riskier move here, because otherwise things are going pretty badly. Bishop here, threatening this. And now the danger is like f6, queen b3. Starts to make threats of d5 and a3. You go queen d6, a3, knight here, queen here, rook here. And it turns out well. But that's not the end of the story either. Maybe it's good. Maybe that's the end of the story. Maybe that's good. Queen d6, nice move. Yeah, maybe that works out for black. But I mean, you would have to really calculate that well to go for it. That's precarious, that knight b4 thing. Yeah. Oh, it's raining again. How nice. Like last night. Okay, so this is the move I would want to play most, but it's also extra risky. Because compare that to the move in the game, Kappa puts something in between the queen and the rook and controls this knight d5 move. It really depends, Shirogorov, right? That's where, you know, you might have to look more into the kid, and it depends on your own strengths and weaknesses. Anything you look at in terms of your opponent's strengths and weaknesses, you have to compare to your strengths and weaknesses, right? If you figure out that they're weak in some kind of position that you're even weaker in, that doesn't tell you you should go for that position, right? And if you find out that they're strong, maybe you still play to their strength if that's your biggest strength, you know? So it depends. But generally speaking, at my level, you have to be somewhat flexible, but insofar as you can control the direction and aim for something, I would be aiming not to play something super sharp against the kid. Yeah. And the moving too fast is really for like very young kids, Shirogorov, who I don't play against. So it doesn't really, it doesn't come up for me personally anymore. Like the absolute youngest kids I play against are basically 12 or 13-year-old prodigies, right? Those are the youngest players I play against. I played Nizhnik at 12. I played Erdogmus, Yagiz Khan Erdogmus last year at 12. I played an American 12-year-old who was only 2,200, you know, so quite a bit low rated when I played a tiny local tournament. So I'm rarely playing kids who are, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10, which is where they'll be moving too quickly. Once you're talking like a 2,400 rated 12 or 13-year-old, they're not going to have that kind of weakness of moving too fast in critical moments. They'll be too serious for that. And so they'll just be tactically better than me, probably. I mean, at this point, like tactically, I can calculate pretty well. It's just I'm slow, right? So the weakness is not even that I'm miscalculating. It's just that I'm slower. And so I'm getting into time trouble. You know, I'm just not fast enough to do a ton of calculation many times per game. No matter how you play, you have to calculate some, you know, pretty much, against a good opponent. You can't win the whole game without ever calculating. Okay, so this was the like safer move, as I said, right? Controlling this knight d5 move, getting in the way of the rook, looking at the queen. So there's a little less tactics on that file. It's a very solid and pleasant move for Kappa to play. And black's dream is to have time for rook d8. And this a3 move from white didn't really threaten black's supremacy. They quickly played rook d8. And after bishop f1, they further expanded with bishop g4. Slightly risky move. compared to just something like f6. You know, just f6, securely defending this. Yeah, most kids will also be underrated, which is another thing to know, Sherogorov, right? Like if somebody's 20 to 35, their rating's probably accurate. If they're under 20, there's a good chance that they're underrated. And if they're over 50, there's a good chance they're overrated and that they're just waiting to slowly bleed their points. So that could be a consideration in terms of overall strength. Okay, so yeah, here Kappa switches from playing safe moves to playing a more ambitious move with bishop g4. Looks sound against knight d5. But like maybe white could even try the move d4 here, you know? I don't know for sure that that doesn't work. And there's also b4. This is a classical tournament, melt like butter. RKJW, your comment seems to be slightly out of context, but I imagine you're talking about Kramnik? And whether or not we should even make a video about Kramnik? Yeah. Yeah, I thought we were just having a conversation before recording. The plan was not to release the recording of that on YouTube. So I don't know if we should or not have released it on YouTube, because obviously Jesse and I hadn't prepared to talk about it, didn't really mean to. So I understood people's point that a few people made, that we were uninformed and shouldn't talk about it. He started defaming us on Twitter. Okay, I didn't even read Twitter, I guess, fortunately, or something. You know, RKJ, like the way he blocked us. Okay. You know, the way somebody interacts often is a useful extra clue as to whether or not they're right or wrong about something. You know what I mean? Like, if he can't be polite to us when talking to us, then it's true. I don't know what the latest stuff is with Danya. I have no idea whether Danya ever cheated or not, or something like that, you know? But like, if Kramnik can't be polite to us, some random third-party strangers who've been perfectly polite to him, that is not a good sign for whether or not he might be right about what he's talking about. That's Elise's chess dream, is to be accused of cheating. So for anyone out there suffering from being accused of cheating, calm down and realize that you are currently living out Elise's dream. That's her dream, is to get herself accused of cheating by Kramnik. We are puppets of ChessCom. Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, you guys know we're not puppets of anything. Hey, Andras, how are you doing? If anyone in here doesn't know, Andras is a fantastic chess teacher. He's got a YouTube channel as well, which you can find if you search YouTube for Andras. So go do that. I don't have a link at the ready, but one time Elise's opponent DM'd her F off Smurf, and that made her day. That's great, Elise. Yeah, other people should be as happy about it as you, right? Just realize that if somebody's accusing you, hey, it's a good thing. Maybe you played great. Good on you. Big up yourself. All right, let me check back in on my exchange French. I know very few people are going to be as excited about the exchange French maybe as me, but you know, should be. So let's check on Hokey Gamer. Why can't I see the game I want to see? The Chess.com interface just doesn't work at all, says the puppet. Why can't I even load a game that I was already watching before? And I was just dot. Remember when they had live chess and it worked and it was great? Like 3 years ago? Also 10 years ago? Just see nothing here. My exchange French. The key is you have to refresh 6 times, hit back twice, hit up, A, B, A, refresh again twice, and then you can see the game you're watching. All right, let's see what moves we missed here. So it was bishop f5, queen c2. I've got my live board here. Then rook e8. See, transposing exactly. Rook e8. Punching the face. Now, if Kramnik had bulletproof evidence of cheating, could in fact logically argue that the cheater started it and claim sympathy for verbal attacks against Kramnik. Right, but Shirgorov, again, I'm very uninformed on this, but what I was told, so I was going off of what Kostya was filling us in on, right? But what I was told is he was saying that he had the right to attack other people because other people had insulted him online. Not because Danya cheated. Which if that's what he said, that would be a logic I would understand. If you said, I'm bullying this person, but it's because I know that they are a cheater and I have proof and evidence of it, then I would agree. That makes sense as to why you don't have sympathy for them. But if you're saying a third party insulted me, therefore I don't have sympathy for this person who I'm insulting, to me, that is like just an absolute lack of logic. That's what I was thinking, right? And it doesn't depend on whether or not there's bulletproof evidence. Castles. Queen d7. Logical moves from both sides. Trade. Knight b3, letting the bishop on c1 out. Knight ce7, heading for a weak square on the king side. It's beautiful play by Gil, who I think has a little advantage. Knight e7. I mean, it's minute for now, but it's a little something. The knight heads towards the king side. With the idea of, at some point you can come here or here. I'm not sure how we're going to make much out of this at the moment. White should be able to play rook e1 and start trading some rooks to reduce any potential pressure later. Yeah, I mean, look, if some people cheated at chess and then Kramnik accused them, then from the perspective of cheating accusations, the people who cheated would have started it. I would agree completely on that perspective, right? I don't know how they caught Petrosian King Wiki because they were completely tight-lipped about it. Very, very... That was the case where I lost confidence in Chess.com's cheat detection for the first time. You know, up till that point, I'd always given Chess.com's cheat detection the benefit of the doubt, King Wiki. I'd always thought, like, I believe in what they do. And after that case with Petrosian, I thought, I've been a little bit biased, I guess, and it's time to be a little more open-minded about it because the Petrosian case, whether they were right or wrong, the key thing is that they didn't ban him at first, so they evaluated him as not cheating, right? Let one match stand that went on to the next match, then somebody complained, and then they went back and retroactively banned him from before. So and they never explained it. So it both showed that they could be wrong because they have to change their own ruling, and that they weren't going to explain in any way how they were or weren't wrong or why or whether it was isolated or not. So after that Petrosian thing, I went from like really confidently trusting Chess.com's cheat detection to like, well, maybe usually right, but we're not going to be 100 on this. The idea, RKJW, is, are we picking people who are going to be higher rated in 1, 2, or 3 years than each other, not necessarily in 6 months. So the idea is that we hold on to those picks for a while, right? If you pick by age category, then it's a little less controversial, right? The picks become a little bit more clear, maybe, right? Like in an under 12 category, obviously Oro would be the first pick, and in an under 14 category, of course, Erdogmus would be the first pick, etc., etc., etc. So I don't know. I thought the way we did it, it made me do some interesting thinking, and I think Jesse and Kostya also had to do some interesting thinking. So I liked the way we did it, you know. I think as long as we're having to make interesting decisions, we've got a decent format. Okay, so Rookie 1. I'll say I don't think that Black can go Knight F4 yet because I think they're just a little too stretched tactically with the Queen defending the knight here. And then I expect something like Queen C8, Knight B7. And it's not that good. Or actually, Queen C8 even walks into worse. Much worse. Yeah, oof. So Black's not yet prepared to come in and do any real damage to White. The Queen's busy with this. You might want to play the move B6 to limit this knight. I've been thinking that ever since Knight B3. I thought B6 immediately was a plausible candidate as soon as the knight came here. I was really thinking of playing B6. Black did this maneuver, and now definitely I think B6 could make sense. You can try and be more like proper with this, but you always have to deal with Knight C5, right? So, and then again, you can move the knight to H4, so your queen doesn't have to keep defending it because it's keeping your queen from controlling the E file. So you could play a knight H4 move and trade one of these knights. That's probably a plausible candidate move for Black. Knight here, right? Takes. Totally reasonable. Yeah. So I would say those are the two moves to me. B6 and this knight to H4. But our queen can't sit here defending this knight forever, actually. It's a liability. To be be holding the piece like that. So what we used Troy for picking was we just picked for the junior thing. We just picked anybody who's currently on the 2700 chess junior list, which is 20 and under. Now Alireza was picked last year when he was 20 by Jesse. Now he'd be 21. Right now, Shirogorov, there's no plans to drop the players. So the point is you can pick somebody low if you think that eventually they'll have a high rating for many years. There's two options. One option is ultimately we force everybody to drop a couple people each year. It's pretty similar, but we could say like each year you have to drop 2 or 3 people and you draft 3 more. Or we could just set like a roster size. So we could say the maximum roster size is 10. And then, you know, just voluntary drops to the extent that you want to make any drops to grab new players and increase your roster. It's not raise the curve. My mom made this painting before she really knew Jesse too well. Okay, we've got to move from Gil. Let's see what it is. Bishop E7. Okay. Not really sure what that's about. I guess avoiding rook trades might be the most obvious aspect. Oh, Gil's getting in some real time trouble. 11 minutes left. Basically at the end of the opening. They're at move 14. They've got a long game left to play. So yeah, Gil's used over 40 minutes and has 11 left plus a 30-second increment. Well, look at that. Andras is playing a game online. It's funny. So we also had this game here. Oh, chess.com, you're killing me. I can't even click to other games. You're kidding me. It's like unusable. Oh, how did this happen? When did this happen? Oh, that could be fun, Jake, to have some picks who don't count towards your roster yet, but you've got them kind of in the minor leagues, right? Working their way up. I could put Faustino Oro there, you know, and eventually count him once he gets good, but he'd be on in my system. I can't click to another game. This is so annoying. So annoying. Knight b5, a6, knight d4, bishop g7, bishop g5, boom! Small beak tries to grab another tempo. Yeah, his opening's just not working out for White at all. At all. White's trying to play these like aggressive moves, but you're just losing time. I just don't understand. Normally there's this like games tab with the games you're watching, and you can click on other games that you were watching to tag back and forth between them. Now none of them show. I literally can't switch between any games. And even when I find the games, like, I mean, this is just brutal. But look, even if I go and find the games in the tournament by opening up the tournament, and I go and click on it, you see it doesn't open up the game. I click and click and it doesn't open. I can click on one of the players involved. and click watch. Last time it didn't work. Now it did something, but that's still not their game. Now it's reappeared over on this list finally? No. It's showing Hokey Gamer and Vlad, which, okay, that's helpful, but still not the game I'm trying to watch. You know, it's outrageous. I just don't understand why it completely doesn't work at all. And it used to be so good 10 years ago. Yeah, Shirogorov. I have the same opinion as you, actually. The game versus Robert is even better. We put them both in our training program. They're both good enough to be among the top, 20 games that people should have seen, I think. They're both worthy of that position. Rylix, I can't play with you right now. Because I got to try and find this game to comment. Go on, Dan. All right, I'm going to do the combo. Back, back, refresh, back. It didn't work. Coach. Matthew Freeman is a coach. But how can I watch Matthew Freeman's game? Stop spectating? If only. Outrageous. Outrageous. I mean, what am I even supposed to do? Bishop pair for black over here. I agree, Shirogorov. More genius, for sure. Deeper and more genius. I think Jake is trying to save me here. This is just outrageous that I can't navigate this. So the knight f7 game. Oh, brutal. 2 free pawns. That does work. Thank you, Jake. Thank you very much. Oh, just brutal. What? Don't you want to like move a pawn for this bishop? Giving the bishop pair and getting tied up? Weird. Very, very weird by white there. Very weird. Here, this move, I mean, it's just bad. White should move one of those 2 pawns. Either one is powerful. F3, F4, H3, H4. All 4 of these are crushing. Valuing the centralized knight. Yeah, maybe, but there's no reason to give up the bishop pair. The knight's just not as good as a bishop. And you see the way white set up shop, their pawn majority on the king side is now backed up and not usable. You could have actually tried to find a weakness in black's position after h5. You could have used this as like a hook to make further progress, right? Like let's say you play f4 knowing that after this move you have this move, right? Or maybe you even want to play f5 first to have f6 coming. Or you can play h4, g4, f3 like this, right? And harass their king. double rooks on the F file very quickly. Could be another idea, right? So, I mean, to me, there's stuff to be done here with H4 and F4. And instead, we're giving up the bishop, then playing this weak H3 move as a follow-up. Yeah. No bueno. Yeah, this pawn's going to be traded, and then as Shirogrov says, this knight can always be challenged by the bishop, right? And with only one pawn on d4, it's not secure enough to just hang out there. So yeah, not stable. I mean, white's got 2 extra pawns, so it's still winning, but it's not been the right approach. Here, there's a very good chance that f5 is a powerful move. Or bishop g6 followed by f5 maybe. But let's see what happens. Get the trade. Okay, what's the follow-up to that? It goes without saying that white's playing too fast, right? An hour and 25 left out of an hour and a half. Deep into the game. Yeah, so the idea of f5 would be, first of all, they don't want to put the bishop back on c8 and trap their rooks, right? So something like this move. And now I suppose trading is reasonable. Check here. So we've got knight e3, we've got f6, we've got rook e5, rook e6, all in the air. And it looks beautiful. Well, melt like butter. I mean, I do it every time I play pretty much. The more you know, the more there is to think about. I mean, I'm trying to evaluate different options to know which one is better. I'm trying to calculate a bunch of lines, looking for an idea. I've spent my life playing 6-hour games, melt like butter. 42 game in one, 3 hours each. Now bishop here, looking at this f7 square somehow. I can give you one example, melt like butter. Here white has an option to go knight check, bishop takes, rook takes. On the plus side, you get your rook into the 7th rank, and you make space to develop the other rook. On the minus side, you go to opposite colored bishops. Right? So for many players, it would be hard to evaluate whether on balance that favors white or black. You see what I mean? Sometimes you can be guided by having like a positional knowledge or instinct that comes in very quickly. This is an example of something where you could hesitate about evaluation, right? You say, I don't know if I want to like do this knight for bishop trade. And you could spend 5 minutes just wondering if that's good or bad for you to do that. Then you have to compare it to some other possibility. And if the other possibility is also hard to evaluate, then you're struggling to know which one is the better one. This is a position without like dramatic calculations, right? So there's, broadly speaking, two things you could spend your time on: calculations or evaluations. You know, sometimes you've got a position where there's so many possibilities, you're sort of crunching and crunching the positions up to a point where the position gets foggy for you. And you try and recalculate the variation. You burn a lot of time trying to get the position right, and trying to figure out what your options are. Other times you can see what your options are, but you don't know what the evaluation is. Fabi says 90 plus 30 is very unforgiving. Yeah, I mean, in the U.S. Championships, which was a really fun, fascinating tournament that we looked at just maybe 10 days ago, you noticed very often the players getting into dramatic time trouble, right? All it takes is for like one decision to be difficult. You spend, 20, 30 minutes on one decision, and now you're super low on time, in addition to the fact that you're playing a tough position against a strong opponent. It's very, very easy to run out of time and make the game really difficult for yourself that way. They had a time control at move 40 where they were getting extra time at the U.S. Championships. So another tournament with 90 plus 30. But they were getting to severe time trouble just at move 20 or so and rushing to move 40. But 90-30 overall, yeah, you don't have much time. One or two real decisions to make. Edward says, surely this exchange would favor white. So maybe Edward's better at evaluations than me, and this is easy for Edward. To me, it's not obvious. That's true, Melt Like Butter. You have time. In a real long game, you've got some time to reflect and pull yourself together even, yeah. Let's see what Black did about bishop g6. You would think rook f8, covering the squares on the f-file around the king. And that is what happens. And now bishop f7. So white wants to get into the f7 square, but not do the opposite colored bishop thing. Black tries to avoid that light squared bishop trade, which I agree with. And now does white have anything special here? Oh, wow. White's going for something super special. Exchange sacrifice with rook f1 and knight g6 coming. It's totally sound. Fantastic move from Fam Tantra, despite playing really quickly. That was at the American Cup, yeah. Was the American Cup 90 plus 30, Shirogorov? So here the black king can go to e4 or g5. In either case, the move knight g6 might recover white's material. Just sort of like a small combination to sack an exchange, then win back an exchange. And in all those trades, you're getting closer to an endgame you can win with your two extra pawns. It's a nice combination without allowing opposite colored bishops. Very winnable material count here. King g5, knight g6, rook f7, king g6, rook e7. We got a pure rook endgame. Not the easiest to win, but the rook is so much more active than black's. And two extra pawns, you would definitely think that it would be enough to win, right? You guys follow that calculation? Also, speaking of following, here's a link to follow I Am Rosen, another wonderful person and chess teacher. There's a link for it. I recommend it highly to everyone here on my channel. Give Eric a follow. To anybody just arriving who doesn't know me or what we're doing here, welcome to the Chess Dojo. I'm one of 3 chess coaches running this outfit along with Jesse Kraai and Kostya Kavutskiy. And what we're doing here is a lovely dojo tradition, the Friday night fights. These are classical games people play against each other while one of the senseis or more commentate on the games. So here we've got Pham Tantra against Dan Shields. We've got a few other games we've been following as well. White's just done a nice little combination here, which I'm pretty sure works, which goes rook f5, king f5, rook f1. And I was just walking people through the calculation that after king g5, knight g6, hitting the bishop and rook, white should regain the exchange sack. Does Chess Dojo have real-life meetups? Asked Melt Like Butter. Occasionally. Basically, at chess tournaments. Every now and then, a bunch of Chess Dojos go to the same tournament, you know, and then we'll meet up there. When I was in France, I also twice went to this chess club in Paris, or chess bar. What would you call it? Blitz Society, it's called, and it's kind of like a bar where there are chessboards on every table. We might do a dojo camp next summer, Jake. Yeah, we might. You've been there many times. Cool. Yeah. So I went there, Melt Like Butter, when I was living in France last year. I went there a couple times, met some dojoers, had a nice time. One time Kostya came with me on his way to a tournament in Corsica. He was in Paris for a day, so I took the train in and we went. Nice raise the curve. Nice move. So for anyone who was not clear, I will show the position that I referenced before with my calculation. Takes here, undefending the knight. Rook takes, luckily attacking the bishop. If the bishop could go to c5 check, this whole line would be busted. White would lose instead of winning. But as far as I can tell, the bishop doesn't have any super clever move here. Actually, I mean, maybe bishop f6 could be interesting, right? But here's the basic position I was showing. And with the rook here, the 2 pawns will be enough to win, even though rook endings are difficult to win. 2 pawns plus the well-placed rook is good. This pawn's not amazing, but the rook is really good. So that should do it. Let's quickly look at black trying to be more clever here with something like this. What should white do then? Maybe knight f8 or knight f4. Yeah. I mean, knight f8, you're threatening knight h7. That's a little awkward for black. You want to grab the pawn on b7? Well, here I got to deal with my knight, right? So I got to do something about the knight. Why knight f8? Well, like you, Melt Like Butter, I want to grab the pawn on b7. But first I want to save the knight. And I was thinking maybe if I made trouble for black with this knight h7 threat, I would somehow have time to grab the pawn. That's what I was hoping. Bishop doesn't have a lot of great squares to go to here, right? To get out of knight h7. And if the king goes here, we just play knight h7 anyway. So, knight h4 playable as well. Raise the curve points out knight h4. Check. Here. 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 Probably winning for white. Just calculate a little bit. But it's a good suggestion. Raise the curve. I feel like my knight f8 move's actually very good here. Honestly. Like, what's black doing about this knight check? It seems like the bishop has to go to this horrible square on h8, right? Then I centralize my knight, check. King comes here. And then I grab another pawn. Now I've got 3 pawns. And I'm feeling good. Dun-dum. Dun-dum. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Yeah, this is good. 3 pawns in the sky. You know how I feel. So, has black made a move? Not yet. Black is thinking it'll be to no avail. There's no way out of this thing, probably. That is a fantastic song, right? Fantastic. There's probably no way out, but you owe it to yourself to just look desperately when you're about to go down. You have to look for any possible move to get out. Let's try this move. Knight g6. We're gonna try and activate this bishop. Give up this. Give up this. It didn't work. That's too bad. Can we do something like this, maybe? And get opposite colored bishops? And blockade this majority? Oh, this looks pretty reasonable for black. How does white intend to make this one work? On Dada, it started with white playing really quickly and continued with white playing really quickly. It was a Petrov like this. I'd never seen this bishop b4 to e7 defense, so I was instantly out of book. And black had d5, strong move. But this was a blunder on move 7, walking into knight f7, and white's been up 2 pawns ever since. Ever since this little simple combination here. Okay, so black's right to be thinking, I think maybe king e4, knight g6, save your bishop. This is going to be hell for white to try to win this endgame with opposite colored bishops. Hell. Absolute hell, because this lineup's not even making it very easy to keep rooks on the board. If you trade rooks, it's done. Draw, agreed. So you need to keep rooks on the board, so you need to do something like this, then save your bishop. But I don't know, black's weirdly like got this king boxed in. I don't see how white could ever make progress or anything. I do not tone deaf, sorry. Did white get too fancy? Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, tone deaf. If it's any consolation, I unfortunately disappoint myself every day pretty much. Kind of a matter of having too high expectations. Okay, let's look further at this. Oh, king e4 has just been played. We need something kind of brilliant or pseudo-brilliant now, right? Maybe here you don't rush to take the exchange. You take a third pawn and just keep playing and count on your exchange to work itself out. Knight g6 has just been played, so it could go in that direction. White just keeps playing so fast. Yeah, idea kind of your knight can always come back to the well, right? These pieces are just swarming all over and the king's a little bit stuck. So, yeah. After king g5. So here if black had played king g5, Stamen, knight g6, Wouldn't the bishop move give a fighting chance? Yeah, I didn't cover it in this move order statement, but I think that yes, that gives black a fighting chance. Absolutely. Just making sure to go with the opposite colored bishops instead of trying to save the rook. Yeah. Now, once we're talking pure opposite colored bishops, I am not very optimistic about white's chances of winning this endgame, period. I mean, this pawn majority is basically gone in the opposite colored bishop ending. Maybe king g5 would have been better than king e4 because it doesn't allow that knight takes h4 move, which I'm now leaning towards in the game position. Knight f8 played, but I'm heavily leaning towards knight h4. Melt like butter, you see what kind of considerations could be going into here, what these players might be thinking about for 10 or 20 minutes if they wanted to really get deep into these choices. If the black king gets in and mops up these pawns, yes, black could be better. It's hard to imagine mopping up all those pawns. Because, I mean, white should always be able to defend, I guess, you know, or check the king away. But I feel like white should have gone knight takes h4, but that's not a trivial decision, right? To say, okay, I'll stay down in exchange, I'll grab the pawn, and, you know, then I'll continue playing with my minor pieces. This position, it's not a trivial decision. I believe in it, but it's not easy. Interestingly, after this, there's a strong move for white, which I just found. I hadn't realized it earlier. Knight f5. Because of rook f7, this is check. So you can actually go knight f5 if you want, kick this piece around. And now what do I do? This move, right? It's opposite colored bishops again, but now I've got 3 pawns instead of 2. That's all the difference in the world, right? We got everything going. Potentially, you could also play this move. You know, kick the rook here and then see if you can work your way out of this. Send it back. You could try to set up a weird mating net here where you go king f2 and then basically whatever they do, you play bishop e6. But this stops rook e3. Yeah. So against other moves, it would be genius. You go king f2, b5, bishop e6, and that's mate coming. Nothing really good to wriggle out of it. Best move would be rook f8, just giving back the exchange again. But c5 gives black some room. Do we have any geniusy anything over here? I don't think so. So maybe best would be just d5. You know, advance the pass pawn, keep pawns on the board, and yeah, the game goes on. Now I'm trying to checkmate with rook f4. I don't know if I ever had knight d6 Shirogorov because the black bishop was always on that square, I think. Like, here in the knight f5 line. Bishop f4. Did you want to try knight d6 here? I don't know where it could have been knight d6. Exactly like Raise the Curve says. To beat a master, you have to like win one little fight after another, you know. You have to You have to outplay them repeatedly, because just getting a good position is not going to be enough to win the game. They're just going to keep resisting, keep resisting. You have to break them down the hard way. Okay, so knight f8 played, rook f8 played, rook f6. So it sounds like white wants to avoid the rook trade by playing rook e6 in a moment. But I mean, I don't know that that's going to work, right? We keep the king on these pieces. Rook e7, king here, rook here, takes. And yeah, white's probably losing. That's how good bishops are in the... I'm missing something? Okay, let me look. Something about rook f6. Okay, so I play bishop g... Oh, bishop g3, bishop g6, of course. Okay, so the bishop has to stay on the rook. Thanks, raise the curve. Very good hint. Okay, and if bishop goes here, there's this. Okay, so not so many options for dealing with this. Can't go here. Oh, this is a very strong move from Femme Tantra. If the rook goes this way, now we're not trading rooks at all. Ho ho. And we can maybe even get our king out. Okay. Well, this gives white some chances. I still feel like it's going to be really darn hard to win this endgame as white now. You've got opposite colored bishops. This pawn advantage is almost not worth talking about on this side. So it's pretty much you've got a pawn here and opposite colored bishops, and black's king in amazing position. Your king needs to get into the middle to have any real hopes here. No, it's looking tough to me to try to win this. See what other games I have that I can watch. Check Hoka Gamer and Gil. So bishop e7, knight e5. Yeah. White pounces. Queen backs up. White trades on g6. White's eliminated their disadvantage in one move here. Fg6, and the bishop comes out. Yeah. This move here even weakened the e6 square. It's unnecessary. It'd be better to play h takes g6, I think. But you can see how little it took for white to neutralize the advantage, how small the advantage was. Bishop e7, one move, white pounces, and it's fine for white. Finally, b6 to keep the knight off c5, knight d2. The knight moves as soon as it's no longer welcome. Bishop d6, trade. Knight heads for e5. Oh no, if black goes here, white can always play f3 eventually. And if white goes here, black can never deal with it. So black needs the knight to sit on something like f7, defending that square. c5, weakening the d5 pawn. I think black is drifting into trouble here. Rook e1, queen f7. Knight e5, queen c7. Now, let's just look here. White plays queen e2. I think this might have been a moment where queen b3 would have been more incisive. This pawn's not easy to defend. We're trying to get black to do this. And then what am I doing? I don't know for sure, but maybe I just come back and head here. I also had the idea of maybe going to a4, looking at this and these squares. Why is c4 desirable for white? So basically, once black plays c5 here, right? This is what I was complaining about. It weakens this pawn. But if these pawns trade on d4, each side will have an equally weak pawn. If I can induce this pawn to advance, then my pawn will always be safe and black's will always be weak. maybe there's some square where I can poke at the queen side, or maybe I just come back and head to the king side for another angle to attack this pawn. But white is comfortably better. Okay, queen e2 was played, a sort of simple looking move. Black plays rook e8. You see what I mean here? Melt like butter, that black could trade, and then this pawn is, the pawns are sort of equally weak. Queen f3, knight e4. That's the game. Boom. Boom. So we've caught up with the live position here. Knight e4 played. By the way, also sometimes melt like butter. If the pawn's on c4, sometimes there's a knight takes c4 tactic. If the queen weren't defending c4 and you had to take with the pawn and then rook takes e4. So that's another reason to make the pawn advance. It can unsettle this whole structure because of knight c4 tactics. Just another little detail. All right. So knight e4 keeps the queen at bay. You can look at c4, trying to crack things. Takes, defending. Doesn't seem to work right here. c4 takes. Do we have anything else brilliant for white? Nah. So we don't have c4 yet. We could play something like knight d3. Trying to say that this knight is not going to be so free to move, and bring the knight to f4 to pressure the actual weakness instead of sitting on an outpost. Because like outposts are pretty and all, but in chess you also need to like pick something to attack at some point, right? So maybe this knight f4 plan could be interesting. Another option is h4, h5. Just making more space for your queen to get at black's slightly weak squares. And yeah, these are not trivial decisions. I mean, how would you know whether this plan h4, h5 is better or worse than knight d3 to f4? This is the kind of stuff where you can spin in circles in your brain for 10, 20 minutes, not knowing if your knight's better on e5 than on f4, and you just don't know if you should do it or not, or should you try and trade this pawn or leave it here? You could do an exchange sack, but this one I can tell you is not winning for white. It's playable, but not winning. Probably white has enough to draw, but not enough to really win. I mean, they can't even be perfectionists, melt like butter, but they're... The stronger the opposition, the closer you need to be to perfection. In this position, you threaten queen d5, knight f7, winning. And if black plays h6, so the king can escape from queen d5, then you can win a second pawn here for the knight. So now you've got knight and two pawns, and both your pieces are on good squares. So, maybe even pressure black a tiny bit. But it should be, reasonably close to the balance. Hi, world peace with humor out. And hey, chess lover, how you doing? We're doing a classic here, Friday Night Fights. Good stuff, I hope. Hokey Gamer, good to have 18 minutes at this point, because this was a heck of a decision right here, and the choice was queen f4. So first of all, this introduces a little knight takes g6 tactical threat against the unguarded queen. All right. Secondly, it clears the way for f3 anytime you want to upset this knight. The queen's also still on f7, so black's queen can't wander somewhere random. Like if they go trade. Well, sorry, I'm wandering somewhere really, really random. I was trying to find a square the queen might want to go to. Maybe here, trying to attack things. Then there's always queen f7. So the queen needs to stay on f7, but maybe get out of the way of knight takes g6. So then we're talking about moves like queen b7 or e7 as kind of the candidate moves. And they all, yeah. All right, butter. Have a good breakfast. I guess maybe queen b7 makes sense, defending these squares. Rook e7 defending the queen against knight g6, yeah. Totally possible. This kind of boring looking move might be a little bit annoying against rook e7. Basically looking at f3, and you don't want to trade queens because we come to d5 too fast. There's no way to hold it. So against knight d3, I think you still have to move the queen away somewhere. But you have to keep the rook defended against f3. You have to stop queen b8, so I guess here. f3. Knight here. Takes. Queen check. If the king comes up, then after knight e5, the king's awkwardly running out of squares, right? It has to come to e6, queen c8. No. No. Looks like we lose there. So, and queen f8 or e8, of course, there's this thing to worry about. And knight e8, now we're very passive. I don't know if white can try and take here or just go like this. h6, knight g6. This pawn is really lame on g6, actually. This is a bit painful here, this position. White's got ways to turn some screws. Like there's this move queen a8, and you have to defend this pawn and the knight and the a7 pawn with just your queen. Plus, there's the idea of knight c6 taking the a pawn at some point when queen e1's not good. You know, maybe you play king h2 first and then threaten that. This looks pretty tough for black. I don't see how you get the king out, so the knight's unpinned since the g pawn's hanging if you move the h pawn. It's just an example of how things can go wrong. Rook f8 was played here. That got white's queen back and took f2. Oh, uh-oh. Did white overlook this move? Completely-ish? And then just go back and drop the pawn? If white saw rook f2 coming, would they not have played maybe queen g4? Because then, you know, rook f2 is much less good. All right. King can also come out, but that seems to have its own problem. I think white might have overlooked rook f2, maybe? I don't know. White's the one with a little more time on the clock, so let's see what they did. They played the most dramatic move. So they had some kind of idea against rook f2. I think the move queen g4 was fine, by the way. You know, if queen e3 doesn't work out, which who knows if it will, then it will be said that queen g4 was the correct move, right? Because we didn't have to give the f-pawn. And this move here is... Black's going to have to defend that square, and white's still pressing a little bit positionally. Black puts it all in line with rook f2, c4, takes d4, queen d4, now threatening queen d5, and this knight is hanging. So what's black doing? Knight f6, queen f2. Oh, it's going to be rook d2 here. That's black's plan. Played in 1 second. Bravo, Gil. Clear on what they're up to. And white's got to watch out for queen c5 and queen e5 now. Oh, no. I doubt there's a defense for white, actually. Queen e3, queen e5, c takes d5 is slightly complicated. Black played rook d2 in 1 second, so I think black was ready for this c4 move when they took on f2. Queen e3, queen e5, queen d2. Okay, yeah, there's that too, chess lover. Here, here, boom. Ay, 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 be careful, David. Be careful. Okay, so queen e3 looks quite playable-ish. There's not a lot of other moves. I mean, the queen's attacked and sort of trapped. I don't know that white has many other options other than to find queen e3. One mistake you can make in a position like this is you can resign. You should always play a move like this, and then maybe your opponent won't take the knight, and you'll never know why, and after the game they'll tell you, well, I didn't take the knight because of queen d2. You know? Sometimes people resign in these positions. They're like, well, I saw that wherever I moved my queen, you could take the knight. Always keep playing. Maybe your opponent sees the defense you don't, and so they won't take your pieces. Don't resign until they've put on the board the thing you're afraid of, you know? Oh, that's just me analyzing. This is still the live position. Hokey Gamer thinking. 15 minutes versus 3. There's a 30-second increment, and that's all. That's all they got. Yeah, it's a pretty good game, Shirogorov. Nice positional exchange French between these two. I think white might have missed rook f8 f2, so that's a mistake given that they still had some time left on the clock and they had a pleasant position before it. But other than that, yeah, it's a good game. Against queen e3, what should black do? Against queen c5, white might even take on d5 instead of trading queens. I guess that's okay for black. Yeah, I mean, for the moment, black's advantage is not that big. If you imagine even black just going into the endgame with their extra pawn, and white doing something like queen takes, knight takes, pawn takes, rook takes. This kind of an endgame, white's down one double g-pawn. It's not offensively super powerful, so still have every expectation to save the game. So it's still very tense here. Yeah, Shirogorov, I'm not sure. I think when thinking about rook f8, rook takes f2. Black played rook f8 pretty quickly. So maybe when thinking about rook takes f2, Shirogorov, that's where they saw how they were going to defend against c4 on this move here before taking, considering this and seeing this move to get out of it. Whoa, white plays a different move we didn't look at, knight d3. Okay, so now it's intense. Black's got this move queen g3 that white needs to worry about. There's also the move pawn takes c4, queen takes e4, trying to checkmate on e8. There's also rook d3, queen c5, which I don't think works because the king has h2. Yeah, there's no way that should work. Rook d3, queen d3. Going for this famous kind of combination. I think the king just comes here, and against anything like that, there's this, and the knight's not stable. Whew! Excitement. Okay, so queen f4, rook here, queen here. Took it. Just updating my live board because I like the live pieces here. Oh, what a nice feel it is to have the pieces in your hands. So black to play 1.5 minutes to find a good move. It's a lot of pressure, by the way, folks. You know, sometimes just because when we're watching and we see someone's in a good position, we feel very comfortable and confident for them. But they might not be comfortable at all, right? Because they might be afraid they're going to blow it. What about this move? Instead of pawn takes c4 with the queen, hitting the queen, and if takes, that's pretty nice for black. This pawn's pretty strong and this rook wants to eat up. But we have to calculate this move. Ay, ay, ay. The next big event I know of, Zane, is the World Championship. Yeah. I mean, there's one or two other events of some interest. I just saw on the calendar, like yesterday or today, that this Super GM tournament is happening again, or this Super tournament is happening again, the Chennai Grand Masters. And that's like this coming week. Aragaisi, Aronian, Vidit, Vashilagrav, Magsudlu, Aravind, Tabatabai, and Sarana. Pretty good lineup. Not completely top tier, you know. You'd love to see Firouzja and Abdusadarov or somebody. Maybe one or two more top players up there. Or, you know, just some younger, just one or two more younger people that we haven't seen who are near the top. But they got, you know, they probably did an invitation some time ago. And, you know, Aravind, Tabatabai, and Sarana are players who made 2,700 playing open tournaments. They deserve to play in a closed tournament, you know. Those guys have grinded and grinded and grinded. It's good to see them get in there. Magsudlu's an exciting player. Aragaisi, obviously, an exciting player. And I think Vidit's doing ambitious stuff. So it's a pretty good event that's coming up next week. I think we have too much going on to cover it in depth on the dojo. But me personally, I'll be looking at all the games from it. So just a question of whether I ever look at some of them online with you all. Okay, knight d3. Rook takes g2. Ooh, that's intense. King takes, check. King here. Oh my goodness. There is this pattern that you can try for this move, right? Flashy pattern. But if white goes queen d5, that's always going to fail. In any case, white chose this direction, king f1. Black's down a rook? Is that right? They sacked the rook for one pawn with a minute on the clock? What I wanted to stress here, folks, is that this is a stressful moment for black. Just because you know you're in a good position, that just puts all this extra responsibility on you. Like, if I blow it, I'm going to blow a win to a loss versus a draw to a loss, you know, or a win to a draw. It's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. Black grabs a pawn. The white king looks like it might want to try and run away and win the game. Ay, ay, ay. Does queen g4 force the king back? He's got e3. It's not. Not totally clear. Queen g4 played. Shirogorov, do you know when the next Magnus 960 Classical Tour events are? Do you know any kind of like schedule for those? Yeah, looks like you can't get to d1. You go king e3, but then there's queen g5, and if knight f4, queen g3, and you're down an exchange instead of a rook. You think he just wants perpetual check? It's reasonable. Looks like he's got perpetual check if that's what he wants. Wait, if the king went to f1, knight g3 would win the queen, right? So the king has to go to e3. Absolutely forced. It goes to f1. Oh no. Black's rook sack is going to pay off with 1 minute on the clock. Maybe. Yes. I don't know. Oh my gosh. Gil is calculating. There's knight d2 or knight g3. They both clean up the game. Absolutely forced was king e3 there, it seems. Wow. What an intense moment. I mean, you have to understand, guys. Gil or Jill, sorry, I don't know for sure, is probably just completely freaking out. Found knight g3. Good calculation. That should do it. Once you've got the queen, I think you know what you're doing. But whew. Knight d2 may have been slightly better because the knight couldn't be captured, right? Knight d2. Like, if you're completely clear-headed, the king can't get near the knight to capture it. It has to go like this way, and then you can take here. But with knight g3, the king can go towards the knight. You take the queen, and the king can take the knight. Okay, queen d3 still. Black's winning completely, but yeah, I don't know. The key point I want to point out is we can be very calm looking at this and seeing what the possibilities are, but the players are not. For them, this is like extremely intense. If you haven't played classical chess, invested 3 hours in a game, and then you only have a minute left, and everything you've done leads to that, and it can all be destroyed in a moment's notice, it's very intense. No way, Shirogorov. Really? A classical 960 match? In Singapore, right where they're playing? That's a little bit cheeky to do it right there in Singapore. I mean, maybe it's good for chess journalists that it's all in one place. Rook e3, trying to just keep a little more material on the board. Knight f5 would really be one of those nails in the coffin, as they say. Knight e4. The king should be able to hang on to the rook with that move for now. But okay, Hokey Gamer gives up and Gil gets the game. I don't want to be critical with this comment in any way, folks, but my recommendation to all of you would be to keep playing here as white. If you're against an opponent with 1 minute on the clock, just play a few more moves. They may have some issue with their nerves. They may not, but they might, you know. Just keep going, I think. You think what they're doing promotes the World Chess Championship by bringing more people to Singapore? I mean, the same action could be interpreted as very supportive or very, cheeky and insulting, just depending on knowing what the actual motivations are and the conversations between the parties, right? If Magnus is willing to be an undercard, then that's very, very noble of him. And I think you don't know that. I don't think you ever know that. Without, knowing the conversations that the players have had and what was in their heart and so forth. So we will imagine the best till we find out about it. If there is a classical time control chess 960 match, then 100% we will cover it. 100% we will cover that. Clock Goblin, it's been troubling me. Should I pronounce the name Gil Johnson or Jill Johnson? '97 had to be a blunder. There was G4. How far back? Let's see. Right here, huh? That would be great, Shirogorov. I mean, that's my angle, is to put 960 on the map. Oh man, we didn't notice this while you were playing the game. Hard G. Gil. Okay, so Gil. Jill or Gil? Wait, which is the hard G? J. G? They both seem hard to me. I'm so sorry. Like gorilla. Okay, so Gil. Okay, Gil Johnson playing here with black. I apologize, but you know I'm just trying to do my best with it. Okay, so G4. Was G4 a problem? Did Black blunder the G4 move? That move looks pretty awkward. Clock Goblin. I didn't notice that during the game. But to be fair, I didn't see this move live. We saw this position with Knight B3, and I was thinking B6. And then we bounced over somewhere else, and when we came back, this had been played. And I said, well, that seems like a reasonable maneuver. You spent all the time on the knight maneuvers and then hated them all. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, we spent a lot of time on the game, so you'll have a lot that you can process in the video on demand if you rewatch it later, for sure. My thought was B6 here to limit the opponent's knight, and yeah, well, you can watch the video, and you know where to find me if you have any follow-up questions once you've watched the video later, right? So let's check on this endgame. Very intense endgame going on here. Knight G6, bishop there, takes the exchange. Rook F6, Rook D8, Rook F3, Rook D7. They've made one move in the last half hour, these two, haven't they? I mean, one move each, but still. This was the position 30 minutes ago. And that's what we got now. Okay, so white played Rook F3 so they can check and force the king back instead of in. And that should give space for their king to centralize. Looks like a very strong move from Tantra. Yeah, you can find me in stream, Clock Goblin, absolutely. You just come ask me a question and chat any day. Otherwise, you can find me on Discord too, you know. So let me know if you have any follow-up questions on your game. You provide us the game to watch. You're invited to ask us any questions about it. Very kind, Shergarov. Honest Doubter, it's good to hear your opinion on that. I was unconvinced. I didn't think it was post on YouTube quality. It was just me and Jesse chatting with Kostya before our actual show that we had prepared for that day, which was the junior draft, I think, was the Dojo talk we recorded that day. Milk before or after cereal? Doesn't milk go in cereal? It's like at the same time. Oh, you say which do you pour into the bowl first? Cereal first. But honestly, it just doesn't matter. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do both with the kids. You actually enjoyed it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm mildly surprised that anyone enjoyed it. I don't think it's quite the quality to post. But you're helping me revise my opinion. Yeah, Hokey Gamer. Indeed, there's a lot for you to go back and watch on the VOD. And just as I invited Clock Goblin, if you have any questions after you watch the VOD, you can always find me. Okay, Kappa and Vlad have finished their game. I think cereal first is normal, Eric. But I imagine people could do the opposite and get away with it, so to speak. You know, like sometimes people play a variation and they sort of transpose moves and it looks a little bit weird to you, but it gets the same variation. I think it might be like that. You know, you still get the main line. You just like raise your eyes like, who plays things in that order? So it looks like Kappa won that game. And right now, Chess.com is letting me click between games. So let's have a quick look at what happened here. Oh yeah, last time we saw this game, it was still, you know, positional in the opening pretty much. Yeah, I think that's the standard statement. I think you're a normal person who should not freak out Eric. Yeah, until the end, white had like a tiny edge until the rook came into f2 and all that. And then the rook sack on g2 was like renewed madness. We didn't even have enough time to figure out whether rook g2 should be drawing or losing or winning. So we don't really know. e4. Using the rook on the d file. And then just grabbing some space. And the fight goes on. Dang. Tempo on the rook. Looks like white's holding at this point. Oh, and black gets a renewed pin. The idea being knight takes, queen takes, and you won't be able to move this pawn. Oh, that was kind of evil. Queen moved. Wow. Man, Kappa was inspired, folks. If pawn takes, there's knight f3 and grabbing this. This is like intense how black's managing to hold the tension between these pawns for so long. c5 check, just gets out of the way. Gives this thing, takes that exchange. Trades. If the pawn takes, there's queen f2. If the rook takes, there's queen f3. Beautiful. Just opening that file. Maybe white should play rook e3 here to keep things blockaded. And we get to the end game. And white is flailing valiantly with that tricky knight. Oh yeah, black can't take on a3 or anything. Oh, this is still intense. Gets to the bottom of things. Gets the rook active. Yeah, black's winning, but it's great technique. Holy moly, Kappa. That's got to be one of the best games you've ever played, no? That looks super. That looked like a super game. Holy moly. Let's go back to our evil opposite colored bishop ending, which no one else wants to watch except me, but that's what we're going to do. I've probably messed some of you up already. There's probably a bunch of you who are like me and are like, oh yeah, I'm really interested to watch this opposite colored bishop draw and see how like an extra pawn is not enough to win and life is so futile. I'm sure there's other people who are just like me now. Okay, b5 from black. A very non-trivial move because it's setting up pawns on light squares that white's bishop can go after at some point, you know? A more standard move is something like c5 trying to trade pawns. Or bishop g3 or f4 trying to box in white's king or go to c1 and undermine this structure. What you want to do, if possible, is sort of make these pawns all move to light squares and then you can set up a blockade if you're the defender. So that's why often you look for bishop c1. To go after them, or c5 again, right, challenging them and trying to make space for your dark squared bishop. Right now white's happy that they've got a pawn structure that's kind of holding some dark squares, and black should want to break that up a little bit. You fought very well as well, Otakon, but yeah, Kappa just played like inspired that game, really strong. Okay, so b5. And yeah, Eric says maybe just bishop e8 immediately with the idea of rook here, going after these squares. The king can't even come back and defend because bishop f7 check brings the king off of this. Well, maybe here. And then if you take here. But I think the rook and pawn ending is winning where the opposite colored bishop ending is not 100% winning. But, you know, you need an answer to this move. Actually, maybe this rook g7 move is saving. So maybe we shouldn't make that transition, but maybe bring the king up, you know, improve the king a little bit. Bishop's attacked. You still got everything going on. King f1, and then black loses a pawn. Okay, let's try that. So what did I just do? I played rook d6, check. Oh, you want to go king g1 Dabo here instead of bringing our king out? We can finally get our king out, and we go here to defend the crummy pawn. Oh no, okay, sorry. You're saying yes, king e2, and on rook g7, you come back here and it's all okay still. Maybe so. Maybe so. There may still be a little work to do. This king is so badly placed, so yeah. But I think it might be easier to just improve the king at this point instead of going for the trade. Okay, so let's see what happens. In the game, king e2 was played first. b4, going after the dark squares, good move. Yes, Damon, this is the game where black blundered knight f7, so they've been down 2 pawns the entire game. But with opposite-colored bishops on the board, there's no reason not to look for that draw, right? Now, I think white can throw in bishop e8 here, probably. Also, rook e3 forces the king to f4, which is not that comfortable. Yeah, rook e3 is even stronger than bishop e8. You check here. The king only has 1 square, f4, because on king f5 there's bishop e6, okay? So king f4, and then we come here. Oh, but he can come here now. He doesn't have to go defend. Nope, we cover it. Phew! Okay, that does it. That does it. What about bishop g6? What do you want with bishop g6, Dabo? What's the deal? Oh, you want to go king d3 and set up this, maybe? That looks powerful. That looks powerful, too. Oh, big threats. Big threats. Any other move after bishop g6? No, it's one candidate, one legal move. King comes here. Thrashing. Thrashing. So this bishop needs to move. It's the only move that defends against some number of white's threats. And then maybe we play the full evil move. What do you guys think? The crude approach, which is probably winning, is check. Here, check, and you take this pawn. But Jesse's going to say we haven't studied our mate in twos if we don't find rook f6 here. He's going to tell us to go back and study the mate in ones or something. All right, that's crushing. That's available in the live position, by the way. b4. White's got an hour on the clock, and they've started using it. So the move is check, and then king here. And that's completely killing. Also probably winning is bishop e8. Yeah. And rook e3 is slightly winning. Okay. Oh, so we might not get a draw. Despite Dan Shields' heroics, the 2 pawns down all game may just be too much. And now that Fem is using a bunch of time, starting to find some strong moves in this endgame. For a while, they were just kind of coasting with their 2 pawns, not playing the most precisely. Then it got to a point where with opposite-colored bishops and this majority not being much, it was like the win was completely in question. And now they're like uncorking some really specific, detailed ideas to prosecute the game. Rook f6 is good too, says chat. Okay. Could be. A slightly weird order. Rook f6 here. Doesn't exactly do what we need it to do. Against rook f6, I would want to defend with c5 ideally. Well, probably trade c5. That would be my instinct. I'm trying to break up the dark square control for white. Then my king will be safe anywhere, and it'll be easy to blockade the remaining passed pawn in the center. Am I walking into a blunder or a checkmate or something? Because if not, I'm going to save this game right here. Bishop g6, king d3. So now I've got a new square for my king to try and flee to over here. Takes. And maybe I start fleeing preemptively. Not here. When I take, you want to not recapture after I take? You better be really sure of yourself if you get that fancy. That's exactly... No problem, Dabo, but like I think it's really... This is useful, really instructive what the right moves are to try and save this for black, right? The key for black is you got to break down white's control of the dark squares. It unweaves all the mating nets. It allows you to blockade their passed pawns. This is really the key. And if black had started with c5 instead of b5, b4, white would have had one less tempo to weave mating nets around the king using these dark squared pawns, right? But a tempo on b5, and the king comes up, and now it's too late, right? There's now mating nets too soon, right? White still controls enough dark squares. And that here we even finished things. I mean, we're straight up forcing checkmate. Just off that one tempo of black wanting to trade an extra pawn with the b pawn instead of c5. But yeah, to me, it's very instructive. How, if we go rook f6, how does black save themselves? Going after the dark squares. Going after the dark squares. Right? Going after the dark squares. And then, yeah, we have to run. There's also, maybe, I'm not sure if I'm blundering, but there might also be this move. Let's see, check here, here. Here. Looks like white wins. That was a close call. This might be a puzzle here. That might be the only way to win in this position is bishop e4 maybe. Yeah, I think that's a cool puzzle actually. I'm going to grab that position. PGN, copy that. I'm just noting things down, you know. Just taking some notes in my collection of positions for the dojo. What level would this tactic be? 1800-ish? I think 17 to 1800-ish. Okay, back to the live position in the game. Bishop g6 was played. White found it after 13 minutes of thought. King d5, king d3 played in 1 second. So you see, you think a lot, you come up with an idea, and you play your follow-up. You follow through, you have some confidence, you've looked ahead. That's the good stuff. That's what the 2000s, what we're expecting of them, to have an idea. One or more moves in advance. Hi, Courtney. You appreciate us. Cool. If you saw Kostya tonight, I maybe extrapolate that you live in St. Louis, unless you just mean you saw him on stream. Overwhelmed with the dojo plan and you have not subscribed. Is there or could there be a quick 10-minute video on how to navigate it? Oh, hey, Luke. One second. You're saying here c5, Dabo? Yeah, c5 here for black might avoid mate, but definitely loses the rook for the bishop, right? Which is a pretty easy win for white. Like a simple variation, folks, would be check, driving the king here, check, and take the rook. Enough to win, for sure. Okay, so... is there a 10-minute video on how to navigate it? No. What we're working on, Courtney, is creating a suggested task list that would be much shorter than the overall task list, right? So let's say, for example, somebody's 1300 trying to get to 1400. The training program might list like 30 tasks for them to do, right? And that could be overwhelming for them to not know in what order to do them and which tasks to do when and so forth. So what we want to create is a suggested tasks that goes above the full list of your tasks. And the suggested tasks will be 3 tasks that are a subset of the tasks below. And so that's what we're discussing right now, is how would we make those 3? What would be the algorithm or the process to identify what the 3 suggested tasks are for any player at any given time, to take some more of that thinking out of planning when studying, right? Because kind of the point of the training program is for you not to have to think a lot about what training to do, right? It's supposed to just tell you, do this, and then you just do it, right? At the lower levels, I think it's clear enough because there's not as many things to do. But the higher you get, the more you need to do to go up 100 points, right? It just gets harder and harder. And so at some point, it can be overwhelming to see this huge long list of things to do. I don't know if that would be available in subscription or free mode, Courtney, but I'm just trying to respond as far as like what our thinking is on how to make it less confusing or overwhelming for some people. Bishop g3 played. Rook f6 played. In 10 seconds. Got it. The FAM got it. No, you're totally welcome to ask the question. It's just we're talking about a feature that hasn't been built yet, so I don't know which mode it would be in yet. Or what access a free user would have. At first, we just figure out what the need is. So I guess I'm curious if you feel like that would be a feature that will work for you as far as the overwhelming factor, because you're like exactly the kind of person we have in mind with the idea of building that feature. I suppose your suggestion is pretty decent as well. I could make a video about just how I navigate the training program and how I pick what I do. It's going to be a little bit different person by person, which is fine, but I can make an example. Jesse's made separate videos about lots and lots of different tools and things that are up on the dojo site. Yeah, you're also welcome to communicate with us by email, of course. Right now, Kappa, the 3 suggested tasks are based on a very crude algorithm. We're thinking that's like, it was just to throw up the code to put suggested tasks, but they're not yet really suggested. You know what I mean? They're not like smartly suggested. You can't find our email. My email is my last name at Gmail, Pruess@gmail. I agree, Malt Like Butter. This is about to be GG here. Okay, so Luke Chess, how do you create a FIDE ID for a person? This is over on YouTube. There's another question. I think FIDE does it. You play in a tournament and somebody else creates it for you. You don't go and register with FIDE. Individual chess players are not members of FIDE. All the members of FIDE are national chess federations, like this, like the Norwegian Chess Federation, the Bhutani Chess Federation, the South African Chess Federation, etc. So if you play some tournaments, they don't have to be local. If you play some tournaments that are FIDE rated, your federation will send in a thing for you in a tournament report, and then FIDE will assign you a FIDE ID, and that's how it goes. And there was the resignation from Dan Shields. Congratulations to Fam Tantra on really playing that opposite-colored bishop, ending super precisely. If you want to play a tournament for the first time, you can just roll up, asks Power Blender. Pretty much, you might need a National Chess Federation membership. Individuals usually purchase memberships from their National Chess Federation. I don't know about every country in the world, but like in the US, for sure, that's what you do. You join the US Chess Federation, and then you can play. But in the US, at any tournament you roll up to, the tournament director can sign you up for the US Chess Federation. So you can roll up, but you will have to buy a US CF membership, which is, I don't know, last I checked, $45 for a year or something like that. And then you don't need a FIDE membership. Melt Like Butter says FIDE tournaments cost a lot of money. Maybe. Might depend on the tournament. What's the CM, Courtney? If you don't know the CM, if you don't know the checkmate, how will you know it? How will you look for it? How do you win? How do you find it? Gotcha. Yeah, I think he's talking about having certain basic like patterns imprinted in your mind, right, Courtney? Like you see a position, you just know a pattern, right? Like here, that white would look for cutting off the king and setting up a checkmate pattern like this, instead of just chasing the king around with checks, right? The brute force method. Yep. And that's totally true. Basically, part of chess calculation is just having a store of patterns. There are patterns that you could never find unless you've seen them before. Like here's one that I always think of. When I used to like teach a lot of lessons and try and make this point to people, I would show them this pattern. So you see this position? There should be a lot of pieces everywhere else, but chess.com's analysis board always crashes. So if I make a real position, it'll fail as I set up the rest of the position. Here it's kind of clear because I only left a couple pieces on the board. But I've set up positions like this, you know, with black having, you know, pawns over here and queen over here, and white having, you know, pawns like this and rooks here. And you'll have like a pretty strong player, and they just won't find this checkmate in 2 if they've never seen it before. And you can let a player stare at this position for 10 minutes. They'll never find it. Never. If they've never seen the pattern before, they'll never find it. It's not a long calculation. It's not super long, but it's just you know it or you don't know it. Knight h6 first normally doesn't work in any way you set it up. The king can come out through the flight square. And I haven't set up other pieces, so it's like really obvious. There's only one thing for you to be looking at here, so you might find it and you might not believe me with this example. But I can tell you I've set up positions like this, but just with other stuff going on all over the board. I've set up these positions for dozens of players, and none of them could find it, given tons of time. I mean, you know, beginner type players. So, but if a player has seen it, they see it in 1 second to 0 seconds, right, Courtney? I'm not doing some massive calculations, scanning for candidate moves, right? I just know there's queen h8, knight h6. Once you know it, you just see it, you know, instantaneously. So you absolutely need to have the patterns, right, to build on. And that's why one of the things that players from 0 up to at least 1200, and then depending on the player, it might go on till 14 or 1500, they need to just stock up on tons and tons of patterns, which are found in tactics books or tactical trainers online now and so forth. Here you might also be able to, but you have to imagine black's got maybe a bishop on e7 or a queen on d8, you know, pawns on d5 or c5, so that if you go knight f6, queen f6, maybe they play d4, or they've got an e6 pawn, they can go to e5. So, I mean, you really just have to have the mate. So, there's thousands of these patterns that you just have to know. There's several thousand of them, I think, that you just have to know. And then from there, you use them as building blocks and you put other things together. You know? You know, if I take this position and make a new one, and let's add another theme to the position. Wow, I'm really getting lucky that the whole thing is like working today, the whole board. Look at this chess analysis board working. Oh my goodness. I've not seen this in like ages. Okay, let's do something like this, okay? So look at this position. So what masters eventually do, and honestly, normally players around 1600 start doing this, so we don't need to talk about masters. What players start to do once they've got a good store of the basic tactical patterns, what players from 1500 on up are really working on is they're working on putting things together. So they know about queen h8, knight h8, knight h6, and they see that here it doesn't work. But because they know the pattern, they can start calculating a move like rook takes h4. And they're going to see, like, can I snag this pawn? You know, does the opponent take? Check. Here, mate. Or can they throw in the move d4? Right? Do I have any recourse there? So, and that's where they're starting to put things together, right? They have to look like rook takes h4, d4. Oh, that refutes me, right? So what they're doing is they're taking one thing they know, but then they're double checking it, seeing if a certain pattern that they've seen somewhere before does or doesn't work in a slightly new situation. So that's where it goes. If you know the pattern exists, Dabo, in general, you should see it basically instantly, in my opinion, for the most part. I mean, you're always going to have certain misfires or an occasional blunder or thing that you overlook, but for the most part, the basic patterns, you know, they're just going to pop into your head. You don't have to work for them, but then you check how they work in a certain position or how they don't work. You look for refutations. All right. We have another game going here. What is this? What is going on here? All right. Just don't know what chess.com's doing today. All right. Let's go to current events. Under 1600 arena. Here we go. We've got a live game going. Where's the bread and small beak? Cool. All right, so what do we have here? A full extra piece for where's the bread. This opening had started out really good for small beak, right? I guess small beak's still trying some kind of an attack on the white king. Let's have a look. 45 seconds for white, by the way, folks. What black sacked a piece very early on here. Knight g4, c5, check here. Queen f6. Black could play queen e6, right, and cover the knight. Sacks it, gets a check, opens the file, hitting the queen. Doesn't want to trade queens. Queen b2. Takes. Ay, 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 ay. Oh, it's way too intense. Bishop g4 is possible. Bishop e6 looks very strong. Queen c3 does not look right. This looks like black blew it right here with queen c3. Here's my thought. If you go bishop e6, you're threatening bishop takes b3, queen takes rook, and you're threatening bishop c4 or rook d8. And I would think black's piece sacrifice is justified, and they're completely winning after bishop e6. Completely winning. Smallbeak spent a minute on queen c3. Courtney, you're asking about this game I'm watching? These are dojoers who are playing in this tournament here, Friday Night Fights. These are the links to their tournaments that they're playing in. And yeah, every week some number of people gather and play these slow classical games against each other, and I do some commentary on them. Raised the curve, blew it with the exchange sack. Raised the curve. Were you Fam Tantra? Were you white in the game against Danya Shields? Okay. Well, I covered that part in the VOD. You'll be able to check it. But yeah, I thought the exchange sack was a little risky. I thought you played the whole game too quickly until you found yourself in the opposite colored bishop ending, in great danger of it being a draw somehow. And then you used your time and played super well from there on out. But the early phase of the game you played the early to mid phase you played quite quickly, as if maybe coasting on your extra pawns and not being super precise. And I was not confident that you were going to win that endgame. But yeah, that moment where you sacked the exchange is covered. I thought maybe instead of taking back your exchange, you could take on h4. Yeah, absolutely. It's only worth anything if I'm honest, right? I thought instead of taking the exchange back, you could take on h4, but that made me think that maybe the black king could have gone to g5 instead of e4. Then you can't take the h-pawn. You have to go to the opposite colored bishop ending. Yeah. I'll invite you the same thing I invited the other people whose game I watched pretty closely. Have a look at the VOD at some point, and then if you've got questions about the game that I didn't cover, hit me up sometime, in chat or on Discord or wherever. But it would be a waste of time for me to restate things that are in the stream, probably. Especially for those who were watching it live and already heard me say what I'm telling you now. Okay, what do you think? Raise the curve. Do a little calculation for us here. Does this look like I'm right or wrong that this move should be strong for black? Hi, Mink. Welcome. In theory, I think I have 3 threats. Bishop takes knight, bishop c4, and rook d8 after bishop e6. Finding it hard to believe white could defend them all. I try to be good, Mink. I try to be good. But as we covered earlier today, I end up disappointing myself more often than not. So I don't know if I end up being so good. Yeah, you think rook c1 is probably forced. That's the move I was kind of thinking of. Like, how else do we save the rook, right? Just this single basic threat seems to only have one way out. So rook c1, and it stops bishop c4. But then probably the rook's double, and then it's just hard to find the next move for white, right? Maybe knight c5? What else would there be? Knight c5, I guess. And now, if I try to be more precise than usual, I could calculate b6, knight e6, rook d3. I win. Any knight move, rook takes d3, I win. Something fancy. I should be able to just sort of walk away and win on d3, right? Against anything. Okay, and raise the curve suggests another thing that might be simpler here is eliminate that piece with check, and then just attack this piece. And that's much easier. Yeah, thanks, raise the curve. That's just a clean end of the game. Yep. Yeah, Daniel, I mean, you eventually got quite close. Queen b3, you have just queen e8. We covered much of your game on stream, so I invite you to check the VOD, and if you have any questions once you've seen it, to ask me later on stream or on Discord or wherever I'm easy to find. I'm always on here. My email address is my last name at Gmail, etc. Yeah, that's a kill. Raise the curve. Good call. Okay, so the game went on with queen c3 from small b. King came up defending it. Bishop g4 trading it. King came back. Rook to the open file. Yeah, maybe rook c8 was an alternative, but no, because of queen takes rook. Maybe f5. Pawn takes, and then we can't get here. We can't take back. Rook e6, f3, f5. I don't know. Okay, rook here, rook here. Rook e6, f3, queen check. Yeah. I mean, still one must wonder about f5, right? Black's got a pretty scary initiative here still. I don't know if it's winning, but it's plausible. Plausible. Checked. Came here for rook d1. Defended it. Queen g3. And now what, right? And now what? Well, in a sense, the game is still kind of... White's still a bit tied up. Like, they're not threatening to trade the rook. What's white threatening? Queen f2, I suppose. Yeah. That'll do it. I think white's going to be able to untangle. Oof. Brutal for Smallbeak. Because it was a good sack and it was a winning position. It was a good sack and a winning position. So raise the curve on your profile. I saw that you're a coach. You teach chess lessons yourself? Nice, Rhode Island. Tiny state. Brown and Risby in Providence. I visited maybe only once. Awesome. Sharing the love. Sadly, I don't really have any suggestions for Smallbeak here. There's got it. Okay. Now I see something. Check. And then there's this move. Okay, this is important here. Let's see what Smallbeak's able to calculate. So queen d3. If the king comes here, I want to give check. Oh, but the knight's covering this, and there's rook e2, and you can't go here. I mean, you can get 2 rooks for the queen. I don't know that helps much. The knight should eventually win this game. Huh. Against king g1, there's queen e3. And the king has to come back to defend it. So that would be repetition. And originally against king f2, I wanted to go check. And if the king comes back, then we go check. And we win. For black, actually. Shockingly. But I don't see how to get around rook e2. Is there any hope in this move? Looking to just attack along the first rank. Flight square for the king. Check in your face. Rook check. The king's just going to come here. Black's doing nothing. Yeah. White can just take the pawn or play h5 going for this. Because I would just take a pawn. That's me. Lame but winning. And then I guess next maybe try and bring the rook here. Yeah. Okay, Smallbeak has played queen d3. Yeah, that's the move I was just looking at. Yeah, I think the odds of me going to a tournament raise the curve are pretty low. I generally am lucky if I get to one tournament a year for now while I've got young kids. And I'd want it to be King G1 the move. Okay, well Black's got Queen E3 against that. That doesn't finish things off by any means. Yeah, and the one tournament I play is either going to be something really like easy and local, or it's going to be a tournament with IMs and GMs, and it's going to have to be like a really strong thing for me to want to travel and take all that extra time to travel. Yeah, that's right. Kids grow up, friends hang around. Well, I look forward to that being true. Nice. You're running some real tournaments. Cool. You know, I'm nobody special, so I'm not trying to be precious about where I play or anything like that, or like, you know, like I expect good treatment from an organizer or something. I just have the reality of not much time for me. Against Queen E3, the king can go to H2. Nothing I said was even right. White's just winning whichever way. Just whichever way. Nah. Even with 1 minute on the clock, there's nothing really that tricky Black can do. Well, okay. You could go Queen B1. White can't trade, right? Because they'll hang their rook. So you go Queen B1. They have to go King here. You trade one, and you just grab that second pawn and unseat the knight. And then White still has a lot of work to do to win this endgame. Or endgame, middle game? I don't know. White still has a lot of work to do to win this game if you can grab the second pawn. Honestly, yeah, the knight... Like, if you took queens off the board, I don't know that White could win this endgame. So it's definitely in doubt if we can just get the A pawn. That's with Queen B1. Eric's saying we could also try rook here, Queen C2. Threatening rook D1. And he says Queen F2 is still winning for White. But what about rook D1 then? I don't know, Courtney, but in general, tournaments are not a place to make money. Historically, the economics of chess tournaments were basically a lot of money goes to the hotel or the airline or whatever. And the prizes are not going to be so much compared to the entry fees and so forth. But especially in lower rated categories, like an under 1200 category, they often subsidize the prizes in the master category so that they've got more prize money to try and entice some grandmasters to come play in the tournament. So let's say you've got, a certain number of people, like 10 people playing in the under 1200, and they each put in 100, which is 1,000. They might take 300 of that 1,000 and put it up in the master section to add to the prizes there. And then they might have 2 or 3 prizes in your section for, $300. And then they might have $300 or $400 towards costs or something. I don't know exactly. You want stuff about how to teach chess, Clock Goblin? I've wanted to teach some lessons on teaching chess. Have some chess teachers teach a class and then talk to them afterwards about it. Okay, Queen E2, I think also going after the A pawn. King H2, so we'll get something similar. We'll get a rook trade and then grabbing the A pawn. Okay, so the game goes on. The game goes on, actually. Good job, Smallbeak. Yeah, I think it's like a content that just has not been done yet, Clock Goblin, and I have an insane amount of experience teaching chess at this point. I thought it would be something cool I could try to do before moving on to other endeavors. Something I might be able to contribute. Where is the bread? Trade. Trade. Grab that A pawn. Best way to donate now. Probably, let me see if Exclam Donate has a link. Chess Dojo tip. That might work. Maybe that link would work, Courtney. Otherwise, we have like a Patreon page, and I think on Patreon we get something like 85% or so of what somebody donates. With that tip link, we might get about 95%, which is the most you could possibly get of a donation. And I think some people sign up for the training program just as a way to donate money to us, not because they're actually going to do the training program. The Patreon link, you mean, Courtney? Cool. Take care, Eric. Good to see you. I can probably share any link that you want. I would just have to... I'd have to find it. I haven't handed it out in a long time. Let me see. Do we have like a link, like socials or something with multiple things? Oh, look at that. There's a lot of links right there. Patreon.com/ChessDojo. That's pretty simple. I think that donation link should work fine if you wanted to make a one-time donation. It gives us a very good percentage, I think, like the best there is. And if you want to do a subscription, yeah. Okay, the pawn has been took. Now, maybe Queen C7 would be an annoying move for black to deal with versus just starting to wander with that knight. The knight really needs to find its way to a defended square, right? It doesn't want to just wander randomly forever. Less than 10 seconds left for white. Okay, the knight wanders. For now, the knight wanders. And now the question is for black, you know, do we go queen a5, queen c4, rook d2? What's the prognosis? Yeah, it's a very wandery square, and it doesn't even really have another square it can go to next, right? Other than maybe b7. So it's really loose. White's counting on moves like rook e1 and queen e5 to just hold it in place. But I mean, if black goes queen a5, hitting this, rook c1, defending it, rook c8, queen e5, b6, it feels like you're gonna drop your stuff at some point there. But maybe there's a way out. Like maybe the moment that you play a move like rook c8, the knight slithers away. You know? That said, I think black's got fair drawing chances in endgame. So trading rooks, you know, trying to play this endgame might be totally reasonable for black as a thing for black to aim for. Thanks for the raid, Innate Optimist. Let's do a little shouting here. Shouting into the storm, shouting into the abyss that is the world out there. Okay, so knight c5. Yeah, queen a5 is very plausible. Oh my gosh, the rook's defended. So queen a5 would be just terribly not plausible. Literally the worst move on the board other than queen g2 or something. Okay, so knight c5. So I guess black's reduced to just defending this pawn for the moment. The moves to look at are just moves to defend this poor pawn. Maybe it should just advance. I mean, if you got to move it, move it. Nice, you did a simul. You fought against your viewers. Friday is for fighting, absolutely. Hope you guys had some good fights. I'm sure you did. Those who relish fighting generally do have good fights. Yeah, black's rook is kind of stuck to defending the back rank at the moment a little bit, maybe, yeah. Potentially rook d2 might be a candidate move, because this doesn't checkmate you, you know, it just checks you, right? And you just keep going. And you want to tie some white piece to g2. b5 has been played, by the way. Small beak gets the pawn rolling. Now, the scariest move to me is queen c7, but, you know, maybe after rook d2, it's no big deal. I don't know. There's also the move queen e5 is reasonable, centralizing, and h5 trying to lodge a bone in black's throat is a strong consideration here. Oh, and that's what Where's the Bread goes for. Looking for that evil bone. Okay. Saturday night, known to be just all right for fighting. h5. Okay. One possible move for black, queen d2. Covering h6, putting your eye on the rook. King g7, trying to keep the pawn away. You'd have to have a good plan against queen e5. That doesn't feel right to me. I suppose there might be something like a5 or b4. Oh, small b pushing the pawn. Okay. But once this pawn comes to h6, white's got all kinds of stuff they can do. You know, queen e5 and so forth. f4 is played. Ay, ay, ay. Why not go for this? Was this too worrisome? The queen coming here? I mean, then you could play f4. But then your queen can't get here. But that's the case in the game. f4 now. How does the queen get anywhere? Was that to stop b3? Was white scared of b3? I think that move is to stop b3, actually, on second thought. Which means white was afraid this was going all the way faster than you're checkmating black. Oh, you need to have more confidence, dog. I'm sure you're faster than black here. By 2 tempi, not just 1. Okay, or raise the curve says white could go for f5 and trying to trade open the black king. But, I mean, this move, this is just brutal, right? You get that in there. White is just winning. It's over. Black can't survive that. Okay, f4. Black's got time. White's got seconds every move. White's got seconds every move. Queen c4 looks super logical to me. We centralize the queen better. We challenge this stupid weird knight and get out of the way of the a-pawn coming down too. Maybe rook d3 in some positions. No, I think this f4 was a mistake, and black should be able to make things a little bit more annoying for white with queen c4. Maybe even queen a5. It feels wrong, but it's another thing that white would need to have an answer for, right? They have to have a way, because you can't give up this pawn with check. Yeah. Black trades pieces and maybe wins the endgame. Okay, so this is live position after f4. Oh, some move just came in. What was it? a5. Wow, just really small being very confident just pushing the pawns in this phase here. So this gives white an important tempo to play either h6 or f5. We don't yet know which one is key, but I think black really missed the moment to play queen c4 there. Okay, white makes a trade, straight up trade. Well, now the black king's never back rank mated, so I'm not super impressed with this move. Plus, after hg, black's got the extra idea of king g7 and harassing white's king. So I don't like this move at all, but I guess the next move will be f5 going straight after g6, and it could work out. It might be just fast enough and just strong enough to work out. Quick f5, and white gets over a minute on the clock, which is a bit more comfortable. Now against king g7, there's queen e5 check. So we can't really get this rook h8 harassment, which black might dream of, but it's not that good. I think the more solid move that occurs to me is the move rook d6, covering that square. It blocks the queen out from the back rank for the moment. The rook's got some useful squares it covers. That's the move that's on my mind at the moment. Now, how does it hold up to knight b7? Haven't figured that out yet. Probably would have to head to b6 or f6. Public Discord is talking about all your mistakes in your game from today, Clock Goblin? Got a whole Discord talking about you? There must be like a general channel here. I really struggle with finding my way around Discord. It's so... It's just massive. Memes, ads, coaching, chess news, general. There's general. There it is. I see people talking to you. Wow, they're giving you like tons and tons of feedback on this game. Holy cannoli. Holy cannoli. That's a lot of feedback. All right, Small Beak still thinking. Phone still beeping. Yeah, they're still asking for money. I mean, how are they going to spend the money? There's only like 2 days left. Courtney, you're wondering about king g7, perhaps? Right? And I think the issue with that is this move, queen e5 check from white. And it's very awkward that if you move this pawn, the queen comes in this way. And suddenly you're completely open. So queen e5 is a very unpleasant move for black here. If you go somewhere random, white can take this pawn. And if you defend that pawn, it gets even worse. There's a little pattern for you. For the checkmates. So actually this one check is much more powerful than it looks like it should be. It just kind of ruins black's whole thingamajigger. Castle. Ruins the whole castle. So no king g7. Much as you would love to play it. That's why I think rook d6. holding this rank. Smurfette says queen b2. Doesn't that let white win this pawn? You're going queen h8 to d4 or something? That's madness. Yeah, the game's super intense, Clock Goblin. And this is how a lot of Where's the Bread games go. Like, they play half the game or more on 1 minute, plus the increment. This is intense. So here, Black's got the idea of here, check, going after the knight. Just not even defending the king. And if queen f2, then I suppose you could trade. Your king's safe. And this endgame has very good drawing chances. Let's see what Black did, though. Oh my god, they just continue to ignore everything White's doing. They're blind pushing the queenside pawns. Even FG doesn't raise an eyebrow. This move would have been hard to predict. Very few people so calm as to completely ignore a king being torn apart. Passed pawns must be pushed. I had no choice. He threatened mate in 1. Yeah, well, I had a passed pawn. I had to push it. It was like checkers, you know. I had to capture. Forced move. Passed pawns must be pushed. So I guess now it's b3. I guess we'll get to see White find a checkmate pattern. Courtney will enjoy that. Courtney will enjoy seeing something like here, check, here, check. The knight covers the key square where you can try to escape. King here, and then mate. The knight covers the other key square. Look at this knight holding that king in. Okay. This is brutal. This is basically checkmate right here. No style points for Sensei. Ouch! Ouch! Ugh. Well, I don't have any suggestions for Black anymore. I had some a few moves ago, but now it's like I just see Black wanted to be mated. So sometimes you have to accept that people have different interests and priorities, right? If they want to be mated, like your worldview doesn't apply to them. There's nothing you can suggest. Man, we are the recipients of a lot of raids today. Thank you, Min. Good to see you. Welcome, everybody. Let me type in this shout out thing here. To my viewers, if any of you don't know Grandmaster Min Lei from Vietnam, this guy's a late blooming super GM. Basically, at some point, he was like an IM who was a blitz and bullet monster online. You know, he'd passed 20, not a little whippersnapper, not a little kid. And then he became a GM. And now he's headed towards 2,700. Seriously, in classical chess, I'm telling you. On top of which, he's always been a super nice guy. So give him a follow if you feel like it. Very, very rare to see somebody making, 2,700 if they're not a teenage prodigy. If they're not doing it at 15, 16, 17. Yeah. And sorry, for those of you just arriving who may not know me, I should introduce myself. Hi, I'm David. I'm a chess teacher. I run this channel with Kostya and Jesse. There's 3 of us. And the show you're watching right now is Friday Night Fights. It happens every Friday night in California time. And it's members of our community playing classical games against each other. So this is a 90 plus 30 game we're watching here, between Where's the Bread and Small Beak. White's got 2 minutes left, but they're handling themselves quite well. They've been under the gun for about 5 to 10 moves that they've just been playing off the 30-second increment, and now they've cracked the black king position. It should be a pretty good checkmate incoming. But that's what Small Beak wanted, so we've stopped giving advice for black. Yeah, just stop, just as you all came trooping in. How's everybody doing tonight? What have you all been up to? What did Min show you today? A3. Black has pushed these pawns like 5 times in a row in the last 5 moves, just completely disregarding the checkmate. We actually do not MICL Wold. We have we don't have any martial arts experience beyond having watched Karate Kid as kids, basically. That's about as much as we've got. You're programming in Kotlin using libgdx. Dang, go you. Hi, Silent Assassin. Thank you for speaking. I guess that means you're not practicing assassination at this moment, and I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. Anytime there's a silent assassin, folks, if they're talking, you can breathe a sigh of relief. Very good sign. Okay, you've joined the tournament. Awesome. Enjoy. These tournaments are open to everybody. There's not that strong a... Ooh! That wasn't mate. Rook F1 was mate. We showed this once before, but we'll show it once again. Rook F1... checking the king, and the knight keeps the king from running free. King here, the knight again keeps the king from getting out. Checkmate. Okay, but white's got very little time. They don't quite find the checkmate. Uh-oh. Game goes on a little bit more. I don't know to what extent our training program is based on the martial arts model. I mean, honestly, we started this channel without even having the training program. We just started as, it was just a name. It was just like a place where people train chess, right? Just dojo in that sense. A place where people train. And that was it. There wasn't anything much more than that. So the general issue here, by the way, folks, beyond just calculating some details, right? Which sometimes chess just comes down to calculation. But to some extent, if you look at the position of your queen and knight as far as encircling the king, it should be to some extent apparent that your rook is doing the least of your 3 pieces. So if you're trying to bring more force to the attack, it's very natural to look at a way to get the rook involved. Because like even after queen f3 in the game, if black plays king g8, what am I looking at here? I'm looking at how do I get this rook into the game, right? My queen's there, my knight's kind of there. How do I get the rook? That's kind of what's on my mind. So I think that's something that could help you to maybe find rook f1 as well, regardless of, I mean, one avenue is you recognize the checkmate pattern. You're just doing it on calculation. But another is, your queen and knight are involved and your rook has to be involved as well to get the checkmate. It's another approach. Kill me softly. Yeah, the belts came much later, and they're kind of like cute, but not in any way critical to what we do, They're just, I don't know, a nice touch, maybe. That's right, Clock Goblin. Working with other people, finding training partners is super important, but I think that's probably something that's true in education regardless of field, in any discipline pretty much, that it's really useful to have some other people you work with and practice with. All right, Daniel's back. Yeah, bishop e6 and knight d5 both look awful. But you got to have queen e8. Let me show you a quick line, Daniel. All right, so when I was a kid, more or less the strongest kid in my area was a kid named Vinay Bhatt. And Vinay and I used to play the following line. I was playing white. I didn't know what to do about the Petrov. I didn't want something like this. I didn't have any positional skills to play this position, right? So I came up with some kind of corny gambit. I played very gambit style back in the day. So I came up with this kind of gambit. And in this position, there's lots of things black can do. One thing is knight c6, right? Because if takes here. Okay, but after knight c3, even I would always take, and I take back. This is a gambit that's playable for white, but not that good. And this position, black has to defend the pawn with f6 if they want a good position. Vinay would just play bishop e7 against me, so I just kept playing the line. Knight e5, hitting this, castles, queen h5, and the critical move, the only move that keeps the game going, right, Daniel? Queen e8. Only move. And then I'd go bishop e3 and castle queenside, and white's position is great, but queen e8 avoids, any immediate mates or disasters like that. So that's why queen e8 is on my radar. Yeah. And yeah, it's an ugly move, but it just has to be played. It defends f7, and then life goes on. All right, back to our position. Queen f3 check. King g7 played. Queen g4. King f6. e5. What about the rook? What about the rook? I guess by now, rook f1, maybe king e5, and you're not 100% sure you've got him. e5. That should force him back in, and then you can go rook f1 and get the mate. e6 will also do it, because your pawn becomes so good that your pawn's an extra attacker once it's in here. So e6 will do it as well. Rook f1 is my sort of harmony of using all your pieces move. What do we get? Rook f1. Yeah, 2 minutes left. White's going to find mate in one next move. King e8. It just sucks when your king can't get out. I hate that feeling when I just can't get away with my king. Terrible. I feel like such a, I don't know what, when I get mated. I feel like I've committed some kind of crime previously to get my king mated, like I grabbed a pawn. I was so immoral. I grabbed a pawn. I was materialistic. I was grubby. I was something. I didn't value piece activity properly or something. So Oh yeah, did I play queen g8 earlier in a position like this, raise the curve and just blunder the queen, or had I put a pawn on b3 when I suggested the move queen g8 earlier? How egregious were my comments earlier? Oh, everything I did before has been deleted from the game, so I can't see. There was a pawn at b3. Whew! Thank goodness. Thank goodness. All right, so that's GG there. And now let's set up tomorrow's tournaments real quick. Tomorrow morning we're doing rapid chess, so Club Arena. Call it Saturday Rapid 1800 plus. Games will be rated. The arena will be 3 hours long. Time control will be 15 and 5. Starts on the 2nd at 9:30 a.m. For some reason, chess.com server subtracts 2 minutes from whatever time you put in. So if I put in 9:30, people will show up at 9:30 for the tournament, and it will have been canceled at 9:28. So we'll go here, create this tournament. Starts in 10 hours, lasts 3 hours, perfecto mundo. Let's put it in the MooBot commands. That's one. Now let's make another. Got 2 of these to make approximately still. Kreatovich, Club Arena, Saturday Rapid 13 to 1800. 3 hours, 15 and 5 tomorrow at, I'm starting to feel tired, 9:30? No, 9:32. Copy the link. Put it in the command. And then make another one. Club Arena. Saturday Rapid under 1300. I'm always responding and adjusting. So last week we had poor attendance. So this week I'm making 3 tournaments instead of 4. And whenever we have more, you know, we'll make more sections, etc. Okay. So now, if we do exclam play, hey Laura, if we do exclam play, these arenas should be accurate for tomorrow morning's rapid events. Event organizing, yeah, Clock Goblin. Not my favorite thing that I ever do. Thank you, Raise the Curve, and everybody else. It's been good.